Hi there, friends. Thanks for tuning in to Fiction Domain. Get ready for an incredible journey as we present, What If Harry Was Raised by the Addams Family and Completely Terrified the Sorting Hat at age 11? If you find our stories entertaining, a simple like and subscribe would mean everything to us. Your support motivates us to create more. Here we go. Chapter 1. The boy who was adopted. The night was delightfully dreary when Gomez and Morticia Addams heard the curious thump on their doorstep. Thunder crashed overhead as if heralding a momentous occasion, and the skeletal branches of dead trees scratched against the mansion windows like bony fingers. Ah, what glorious weather, Morticia sighed, arranging black roses in a vase of thorns. Perhaps we should wake Wednesday and Pugsley for a midnight stroll in the cemetery. Gomez, who had been balancing upside down on his head while reading financial reports, flipped gracefully to his feet. Capital idea, my dear. Nothing like a proper thunderstorm too. The sound came again, not quite a knock, more hesitant, like something small had fallen against their massive iron-bound door. Lurch will get it, Gomez said, but their faithful butler was already moving toward the entrance hall, his footsteps echoing through the mansion. A moment later, Lurch reappeared, his normally impassive face showing the faintest hint of surprise. In his massive hands was a small bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. A delivery, he groaned, presenting the package to his employers. The bundle squirmed, and a tiny fist emerged from the folds. Gomez, look, Morticia breathed, her pale face lighting with dark delight. Someone has left us a child. Inside the blanket was a baby boy, no more than a year old, with a shock of black hair and brilliant green eyes that regarded them without fear. Most striking was the fresh, lightning-shaped scar on his forehead, still slightly red and raw. How thoughtful, Gomez beamed, leaning closer to examine the child. And look, Querida, he's been marked already. Such craftsmanship in that scar. Morticia nodded appreciatively. Exquisite. Like a tiny death omen on his brow. The baby gurgled and reached for Morticia's long black hair, tugging with surprising strength. He likes you, cara mia, Gomez observed. Indeed. Morticia gently freed her hair and offered her finger instead, which the child gripped tightly. There's a note. Tucked into the blanket was a piece of parchment. Gomez plucked it out and unfolded it with a flourish. His name is Harry Potter, Gomez read. His parents were murdered by a dark wizard. He is in grave danger. Please protect him. How marvelous. Danger and death, Morticia murmured, cradling the baby. He's perfect for our family. Little Harry Potter yawned, revealing tiny teeth, and then did something that sealed his fate with the Addamses forever. He smiled at the thunder and reached toward the window, as if trying to touch the storm. Ah, he appreciates the ambience, Gomez said proudly. Lurch, prepare the nursery. The one next to the torture chamber, the acoustics there are so soothing. Yes, sir, Lurch groaned. As Morticia carried Harry upstairs, she whispered, Welcome to the Addams family, Harry. You'll fit right in. She couldn't have known how right she was. Years passed, and Harry Potter Addams thrived in his unconventional home. By age 7, he could navigate the mansion's secret passages blindfolded, had developed an impressive tolerance for various poisons, thanks to Grandmama's cooking, and showed an uncanny affinity for communicating with the family's collection of exotic creatures. Mother, thing is teaching Harry to pick locks again, Wednesday reported one gloomy afternoon, her face as expressionless as ever despite the obvious approval in her voice. Morticia looked up from her knitting, a sweater with 8 arms for their pet octopus, and smiled. How educational. Is he using the skeleton keys or the medieval torture picks? Both, Wednesday replied. Pugsley says Harry's faster than he is now. Progress is so rewarding, Morticia nodded. Where is your brother, by the way? Which one? Pugsley. Harry's dangling him over the crocodile pit. He wanted to test if fear makes Pugsley's head explode like Uncle Fester's trick. Morticia's eyes gleamed with maternal pride. Such curious minds. Do remind them that dinner is at 8. We're having Grandmama's special stew tonight. Wednesday nodded solemnly. The one with the eyeballs that follow you around the bowl? The very same. Later that evening, the family gathered in the dining room, where candelabras cast dancing shadows across the black tablecloth. Harry sat between Pugsley and Wednesday, his wild black hair sticking up in all directions, eyes bright behind round glasses that Gomez had specially made, frames from a 19th-century anatomist who had gone mad from his discoveries. "Harry, Querido, how was your day?" Morticia asked, serving him an extra eyeball as a treat. "Splendid, Mother," Harry replied, his voice carrying the same refined cadence that Morticia had cultivated in all her children. "Thing and I broke into Father's safe in 17 seconds. Gomez clapped his hands together. "Magnificent. That's 8 seconds faster than last week. The boy's a natural, Tish." "Indeed." Morticia turned to Wednesday. "And your project, Wednesday?" "I've completed my study on the effects of moonlight on deadly nightshade. Harry helped me collect specimens from the greenhouse. I picked the ones that whispered the loudest," Harry added, chasing an eyeball around his plate with a fork. Uncle Fester, who had been attempting to light a dynamite stick with his teeth, paused his efforts. "That reminds me, Harry made something spark yesterday." "Without matches." The table fell silent as all eyes turned to Harry, who looked momentarily uncertain, a rare expression in the Addams household, where confidence in one's oddities was the norm. "It was an accident," Harry said quietly. "I was in the conservatory talking to the Venus flytrap, and it wouldn't eat its moth. I got frustrated, and suddenly..." He mimicked an explosion with his hands. The moth burst into flame. Wednesday finished for him, the faintest hint of admiration in her voice. Gomez leaped to his feet. "Bravo! Harry's showing signs of magic. Just like the note said, a wizard in the making." Morticia's pale hand rested on Harry's. "Tell us more, dear. Has anything like this happened before?" Harry nodded slowly. "Sometimes books come to me when I can't reach them. And last week, when Pugsley locked me in the Iron Maiden, the door swung open right before the spikes touched me." He sounded almost disappointed about the last part. "I thought the hinges needed oiling," Pugsley muttered. "This calls for a celebration," Gomez declared. "Lurch, the special reserve, if you please." Lurch returned with dusty bottles, and the family toasted Harry's emerging magical abilities with a drink that smoked ominously and tasted like licorice and grave dirt. To Harry, Gomez raised his glass. "May your powers grow as twisted and complex as Addams' family history." "To Harry," echoed the family. Harry beamed, the scar on his forehead a pale lightning bolt against his skin. In the Addams mansion, being different wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated. When Harry turned 10, Gomez took him aside for a special conversation in his study, where mounted swords and exotic weapons covered the walls, and stock tickers chattered in the corner like demented insects. "Harry, my boy," Gomez began, puffing on his cigar, "you're approaching an important age. Soon, your magical heritage will call to you more strongly." Harry nodded seriously, his green eyes intent behind his glasses. "Because of what happened to my birth parents?" "Precisely." Gomez stabbed the air with his cigar. "Murdered by a dark wizard, what a gloriously tragic beginning. But now you're an Addams, and we must prepare you." From a hidden compartment in his desk, Gomez retrieved a slender box covered in dust and cobwebs. "These have been waiting for you." Inside lay 2 items, a yellowed newspaper clipping and a slender wooden stick. "The clipping is from something called the Daily Prophet," Gomez explained. "It was tucked into your blanket when you arrived. It mentions your parents, James and Lily Potter, and their demise at the hands of someone called, let me see, Lord Voldemort." He pronounced the name with relish. "Excellent villain name, that." Harry traced the moving photograph of a destroyed cottage. "And the stick?" "Ah. I believe it's a wand. Found it in your blanket as well." Couldn't get it to work myself, tried to turn Lurch into a newt, but nothing happened. Gomez sounded disappointed. I suspect it's keyed to your family somehow. Harry picked up the wand cautiously. The moment his fingers closed around it, the study lights flickered, and the mounted swords rattled against the wall. A warm sensation traveled up his arm. Ha! I knew it. Gomez clapped his hands. Magic runs in your blood, Harry. While we've given you the Addams education in all things macabre and mysterious, there's another side to your heritage waiting to be explored. Harry looked at the wand and newspaper with newfound reverence. Will I learn more about them? About magic? I expect so, Gomez replied, ruffling Harry's perpetually messy hair. The note mentioned you might receive formal training when you're older. Until then, we'll continue your education the Addams way. Meaning? Harry asked, though a smile was already forming. Meaning, Gomez grinned wickedly, that tonight we visit the old cemetery to practice raising the dead. Festus brought his shovel and Wednesdays packed a picnic. On Harry's 11th birthday, the Addams family had prepared a celebration befitting their unique household. The great hall was decorated with cobwebs carefully cultivated to spell out, "Happy Birthday," bats hung from the chandeliers, and a cake shaped like a guillotine dominated the center table. Grandmama had outdone herself. The cake actually worked, its tiny blade slicing each piece with mechanical precision. Harry, dressed in the formal striped suit Gomez had commissioned for the occasion, was about to blow out candles shaped like tiny screaming figures when a peculiar sound interrupted the festivities, a tapping at the window. "Ah, we have a visitor," Morticia observed, gliding to the towering Gothic window. "An owl, how delightful." Indeed, a barn owl perched on the sill, a letter clutched in its beak. When Morticia opened the window, it swooped in, circled the room once, and dropped the envelope directly into Harry's hands before settling on a bust of Blackbeard. "It's addressed to me," Harry said, examining the emerald green ink, "Mr. H. Potter Addams, the East Tower Bedroom, Addams Mansion, Cemetery Ridge." "Well, don't keep us in suspense, old man," Gomez encouraged, balancing his chair on two legs while juggling small explosive devices. "What does it say?" Harry broke the wax seal, emblazoned with a coat of arms featuring a lion, eagle, badger, and snake, and read aloud, "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, CHF, Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confede, of Wizards, Dear Mr. Potter Addams, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress." Silence fell over the Addams clan, a rare occurrence, before erupting into enthusiastic exclamations. "A school for witchcraft." Grandmama cackled. About time those talents were properly honed. "Hogwarts," Morticia mused. "What a charmingly ominous name." "Supreme Mugwump," Gomez repeated admiringly. "Now that's a title with gravitas." Wednesday examined the supply list over Harry's shoulder. "They require a cauldron. Perhaps they'll teach proper potion making, unlike Grandmama's experimental approach." "My potions work just fine," Grandmama huffed. "That batch only melted half the kitchen." Harry read through the requirements again, excitement building. Spell books, a wand, potions, ingredients. This is real magic, formal training. "Of course it's real," Uncle Fester chimed in. "You've been doing magic since you were 7. Remember when you turned my dynamite into snakes?" "That was an accident," Harry protested, though he couldn't hide his smile. Gomez clapped a hand on Harry's shoulder. "This calls for a decision, my boy. Hogwarts would mean spending time away from the family, in this mysterious wizarding world. But it's his heritage," Morticia added softly. "The world his birth parents came from." Harry looked around at the faces of his adopted family, the people who had raised him, accepted his oddities, and celebrated his differences. Then he looked down at the letter, a connection to parents he couldn't remember and abilities he was only beginning to understand. "I want to go," he said finally. "I want to learn about this part of who I am." "Then it's settled," Gomez declared, drawing a sword from the wall and raising it high. "Harry Potter Addams will attend Hogwarts and bring the Addams family spirit to the wizarding world. They won't know what hit them." Given the Addams family history, this was less a figure of speech and more a prophecy. Diagon Alley was a revelation to Harry, not because it was strange, but because it felt strangely familiar. After growing up in a mansion where moving suits of armor and talking portraits were commonplace, a street of magical shops seemed almost quaint. "Look at these perfectly preserved dragon's hearts," Morticia murmured appreciatively as they browsed the apothecary. "Grandmama would be envious." Gomez, meanwhile, had discovered Gringotts and was engaged in animated conversation with the goblins about interest rates and curse-breaking investments. He returned to the family looking thoroughly invigorated. Magnificent creatures, goblins. Such financial acumen. And apparently, he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "Your birth parents left you quite the fortune, Harry. Gold coins by the vaultful." Harry, who had never wanted for anything in the Addams household, found this information interesting but not particularly exciting. What captivated him more were the books at Flourish and Blots, tomes of spells, magical creatures, and potions that promised to expand the experiments he'd been conducting in the family dungeon for years. When they entered Ollivander's for Harry's wand, the ancient wandmaker emerged from the shadows, his silver eyes gleaming. "I've been expecting you, Mr. Potter," he said softly, before noticing the rest of the family. His eyes widened slightly. "And you've brought company." "Addams," Gomez corrected cheerfully, extending a hand. "The boy's name is Harry Potter Addams. I'm Gomez Addams, his father." "Adoptive father," Ollivander murmured, shaking Gomez's hand with visible caution. "Yes, I see. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter Addams, including the wands purchased by your birth parents." "Actually," Harry interrupted politely, "I believe I already have a wand." He produced the wand Gomez had given him on his 10th birthday. Ollivander's eyebrows shot up. "May I?" he asked, extending a hand. Harry passed him the wand, and Ollivander examined it with growing wonder. "Mahogany, 11 inches, pliable, this was your father's wand, James Potter's." He looked up sharply. "How did you come to possess it?" "It was in his blanket when he came to us," Morticia explained. "Along with a note and a newspaper clipping." "Extraordinary," Ollivander breathed. "Wands usually lose allegiance when their owners are defeated. For it to accept you so readily." He passed the wand back to Harry. "Try it. A simple spell." Harry, who had been practicing with the wand in secret, pointed it at a dusty vase on the counter. "Wingardium Leviosa," he said clearly, using words he'd found in an old book in the Addams library. The vase rose steadily into the air, hovered for a moment, then gently returned to its place. "Perfect control," Ollivander whispered. "Unusual in one so young, especially with an inherited wand." He studied Harry intently. "You have been practicing." "Mother and father encourage educational pursuits," Harry replied with the formal politeness Morticia had instilled in him. "I see." Ollivander's gaze shifted to Gomez and Morticia, curiosity warring with something like concern. "Well, Mr. Potter Addams, it seems you already have a suitable wand. Use it well." As they left the shop, Harry noticed Ollivander watching them through the window, his expression unreadable. The rest of their shopping proceeded without incident, though they drew stares wherever they went, Gomez in his pinstriped suit and spats, Morticia in her flowing black gown with sleeves that trailed along the cobblestones, and Wednesday in her perfect miniature replica of her mother's attire. Harry, by comparison, looked almost ordinary in his new Hogwarts robes, though he'd insisted on having them tailored with slightly more dramatic lines than the standard cut. The most interesting moment came when they visited Elop's Owl Emporium to purchase Harry's companion. While most students gravitated toward the tawny and snowy owls, Harry was immediately drawn to a jet-black raven in the corner, its eyes gleaming with intelligence and what Harry recognized as barely suppressed mischief. "This one," he said decisively, offering his arm to the bird, which hopped on without hesitation. "That's not an owl, dear boy," the shopkeeper protested. "That's a raven, they're not standard Hogwarts pets." "Does your list specify owls only?" Gomez challenged, unfolding Harry's supply list with a flourish. "It says, owl or cat or toad. It doesn't forbid ravens." "Well, technically no, but, splendid." Gomez slapped down a pile of gold coins. "The raven it is. What will you name him, Harry?" Harry stroked the bird's glossy feathers, and it preened under his touch. "Edgar," he decided. "After Mother's favorite poet." "Perfect," Morticia approved, her red lips curving into a smile. "Edgar Allan Poe would be honored." As they exited the shop, Edgar settled on Harry's shoulder with a satisfied caw, and Harry felt for the first time that he might find a place in this new world, a world that, while different from the Addams mansion, might still accommodate his peculiar upbringing. King's Cross Station bustled with the ordinary chaos of a September morning, Muggles rushing about their business, oblivious to the magical students attempting to discreetly vanish through a solid barrier. The Addams family, naturally, made no attempt at discretion. "Platform 9 3/4, Gomez announced loudly, consulting the ticket. "How delightfully non-Euclidean. Reminds me of that space-warping corridor we installed in the East Wing. The one that occasionally deposits visitors in the swamp?" Harry asked, pushing his trolley. Edgar's cage balanced precariously atop his trunk, the raven watching the proceedings with obvious amusement. "The very same." Gomez beamed. "Now, according to our information, we simply walk through this apparently solid barrier. A test of faith. Magnificent." A nearby wizarding family, a plump woman with a brood of red-headed children, stared at the Addamses with undisguised curiosity. "Shall we, Querida?" Gomez offered his arm to Morticia. "After you, mon cher," she replied with a smile that would have sent shivers down the spine of anyone not accustomed to it. Without hesitation, Gomez marched straight at the barrier, pulling Morticia with him. They vanished into the brickwork. "My turn," Wednesday said tonelessly, following her parents with perfect composure. Harry adjusted his glasses, straightened his shoulders in the manner Gomez had taught him, and Addams always enters a room as if he owns it, Harry. And pushed his trolley forward. The barrier dissolved around him, and suddenly he was standing on a platform crowded with witches and wizards. A scarlet steam engine waited on the tracks, belching smoke that curled in the air like living tendrils. "Now this," Harry murmured to Edgar, "is promising." The Addams family's goodbyes were characteristically dramatic. Gomez presented Harry with a jeweled dagger, for opening letters or settling disputes. Versatility is key. Morticia gifted him a small potted plant that snapped at passers-by. "Feed it a drop of blood each week, darling, and it will flourish," and Wednesday solemnly handed him a small black box. "Don't open it unless necessary," she instructed. "It contains one of Uncle Fester's emergency explosives." "Right often," Morticia reminded him, brushing an invisible speck from his shoulder. "And remember, an Addams is never afraid of the dark, because the dark is afraid of an Addams," Harry finished the family motto. "I'll make you proud." "You already do, my boy," Gomez declared, clapping him on the shoulder. "Now go show those wizards what the Addams family is made of." With a final wave, Harry boarded the train, finding an empty compartment near the back. As the Hogwarts Express pulled away from the station, he watched his family fade from view, Gomez waving enthusiastically, Morticia elegant and poised, Wednesday as still as a small statue. He felt a momentary pang of homesickness for the mansion's creaking floors and mysterious corridors, for things tap-dancing messages and Lurch's mournful groans. But then Edgar cawed softly, reminding him that he carried a piece of the Addams spirit with him. The compartment door slid open, and a boy with red hair, one of the children from the large family they'd seen, hovered uncertainly in the doorway. "Excuse me," he said, "do you mind if I sit here? Everywhere else is full." Harry smiled and gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Please, join me. I'm Harry Potter Addams." The boy's eyes widened, flicking briefly to Harry's forehead. "You're Harry Potter." "I'm Ron Weasley." "Potter Addams," Harry corrected gently but firmly. "My adoptive family's name is important to me." "Oh, right. Sorry." Ron sat down, still staring. "So it's true then. You've got the, you know." He pointed vaguely at his own forehead. Harry brushed his unruly hair aside, revealing the lightning scar. "Yes, though Mother says scars are simply nature's way of decorating us with memories." Ron blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "Your mum says that. But I thought your parents were." "My birth parents died when I was a baby," Harry explained. "I was adopted by Gomez and Morticia Addams. They're my parents now." "Oh. I've never heard of the Addamses. Are they wizards?" Harry considered the question. "Not in the traditional sense, though they practice their own brand of magic. Our family has always had an affinity for the unusual and the macabre." Ron looked both confused and intrigued. "The what?" "The macabre. The dark, the mysterious, the things that make ordinary people shiver." Harry smiled, remembering Grandmama's lessons. "We find beauty where others see only shadows." Before Ron could respond, the compartment door opened again. A girl with bushy hair and rather large front teeth stood in the doorway, already dressed in her Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "A boy named Neville's lost one," she said in a bossy sort of voice. "No toads here," Harry replied. "Though I'd be happy to help look. My sister Wednesday has extensive experience tracking amphibians. She collects them for her poison experiments." The girl's expression shifted from officious to startled. "Poison experiments? Is that allowed at Hogwarts?" "I wouldn't know yet," Harry said honestly. "But in my experience, rules tend to be more flexible than they initially appear." He extended a hand. "Harry Potter Addams." The girl gasped. "Are you really?" "I know all about you, of course. I got a few extra books for background reading, and you're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts." "Am I?" Harry's interest was piqued. "What do they say?" "Well, that you survived the killing curse when you know who tried to murder you, and he disappeared, and no one knows how you survived because no one's ever survived the killing curse before, and," she seemed to suddenly remember to breathe. "I'm Hermione Granger, by the way." "Charmed," Harry said, the formal manners Morticia had instilled in him coming naturally. "This is Ron Weasley." Ron gave an awkward wave. "And to answer your question about the toad," Harry continued, "perhaps we could try summoning it. Father taught me a chant that calls creatures of the night." Hermione looked skeptical. "That's not in any of the first-year spellbooks. It's an Addams family specialty," Harry explained, standing and closing his eyes. He began to hum a low, eerie tune that seemed to make the air in the compartment vibrate. Then, in a voice deeper than seemed possible for an 11-year-old, he chanted, "Creature of damp and darkness born, lost from your master, sad and forlorn, by moonless night and shadow's call, return to us in this hallowed hall." The lights in the compartment flickered, and a cold breeze passed through the enclosed space. Ron shivered visibly. "Blimey," he whispered. After a moment of silence, they heard a distinct croaking from the corridor. Hermione pulled the door open wider, and there, hopping directly toward their compartment, was a fat toad. "Trevor," exclaimed a round-faced boy who came running after it. "You found him." Harry smiled modestly. "Just a little family trick. I'm Harry, this is Ron and Hermione." "Neville Longbottom," the boy replied, scooping up his toad. "Thanks for finding him. How did you do that?" "Magic," Harry said simply. Hermione narrowed her eyes. "That wasn't any spell I've read about. And we haven't even had our first lessons yet. My family believes that magic is in the blood and bone, Harry explained. Formal training is important, but intent and heritage matter too. He thought of Grandmama's bubbling cauldrons and Uncle Fester's electrical experiments. There are many kinds of magic in the world. This statement hung in the air, setting the tone for Harry's approach to Hogwarts, respectful of its traditions, but shaped by the Addams perspective that had formed him. As the train continued its journey northward, Harry found himself the center of curious questions about his life and upbringing. He answered honestly, describing the Addams mansion with its sentient decorations, the family graveyard where he'd learned to commune with ancestors, and Wednesday's latest experiments in reanimation. She's only 9, but Mother says she has the steadiest hands with a scalpel that she's ever seen, Harry said proudly. Ron looked slightly green. Your sister experiments on dead things? Not exclusively, Harry clarified. Sometimes they're only mostly dead. That's actually more challenging. Neville clutched Trevor protectively closer. But surely that's not legal, Hermione protested. There are strict laws about tampering with life and death in the wizarding world. Harry considered this. I suppose our family has always existed somewhat adjacent to conventional laws. Father says that true freedom comes from recognizing artificial constraints for what they are. And what are they? Hermione asked, unable to hide her curiosity despite her disapproval. Harry smiled, a smile that contained shadows and secrets learned in the Addams mansion's hidden rooms. Guidelines for those lacking the courage to define their own boundaries. The train journey continued with Harry alternately fascinating and disturbing his new acquaintances with tales of his upbringing. When the food trolley came around, he purchased an assortment of wizarding treats to sample, approaching them with the scientific curiosity Grandmama had fostered in him when introducing new ingredients to her cauldron. Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, he read from the package. Including unpleasant flavors. How delightfully daring. He popped a suspicious gray bean into his mouth without hesitation, chewed thoughtfully, and nodded with appreciation. Ash with hints of decay. Reminds me of Grandmama's winter stew. Ron, who had been about to try one himself, slowly put the box down. As they neared Hogwarts, Harry changed into his robes, which he'd had subtly altered with the Addams family crest, a raven perched atop a hand reaching from a grave, embroidered in black thread on the inside collar. It wasn't visible to others, but he knew it was there, a reminder of who he was and where he came from. When the train finally slowed to a stop at Hogsmeade Station, Harry felt a mixture of excitement and calm determination. The Addams family had prepared him for this moment, his introduction to the wizarding world that had once been his parents' home. As he stepped onto the platform, Edgar settled on his shoulder, a dark sentinel against the gathering dusk. Furs years. Furs years over here, called a booming voice. A giant of a man with a wild beard was gathering the youngest students. That must be Hagrid, Harry murmured to Edgar. Father mentioned him, said he had a promising affinity for dangerous creatures. Hagrid's eyes found Harry in the crowd, widening with recognition. Harry Potter. Last time I saw you, you was only a baby. Potter Addams, Harry corrected politely, offering his hand. It's a pleasure to meet you properly, Mr. Hagrid. Hagrid engulfed Harry's hand in his enormous one, looking slightly puzzled. Just Hagrid's fine. Addams, yes eh? My adoptive family, Harry explained. They've raised me since I was a baby. Right, oh, course, Hagrid nodded, though he still looked confused. Well, come along then. Furs years follow me. As they made their way down a steep, narrow path toward the boats that would carry them across the lake, Harry felt a growing sense that he stood at a threshold between two worlds, the loving darkness of the Addams mansion and the unknown qualities of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Whatever awaited him there, he would face it as his parents had taught him, with curiosity rather than fear, with appreciation for the strange and unusual, and with the unshakable confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was, Harry Potter Addams, child of two worlds, at home in the shadows. When Hogwarts Castle came into view, rising majestically against the night sky, Harry smiled with genuine pleasure. The ancient stone walls, the towers reaching toward the stars, the windows glowing with golden light, it was, in its way, not unlike coming home. "It's beautiful," he whispered to no one in particular. Ron, sitting beside him in the boat, nodded in agreement. "Yeah, brilliant." But Harry was thinking of Morticia's words when they'd visited an ancient castle in Romania. "True beauty, Harry, lies in the weight of years, in stones that have witnessed centuries of life and death, in corridors that echo with whispers of the past." Hogwarts, he sensed, had those whispers in abundance. And Harry Potter Addams had been raised to listen to the voices that others feared to hear. As their boat glided across the black surface of the lake, Harry trailed his fingers in the water, feeling for the currents beneath. Something large moved in the depths, the giant squid, perhaps, that Hagrid had mentioned. Harry smiled. He'd have to write to Wednesday about it. She'd be so envious. The boats docked at an underground harbor, and the first years followed Hagrid up a passageway in the rock, emerging onto smooth, damp grass in the shadow of the castle. They climbed a flight of stone steps and crowded around a huge oak door. Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times. The sound echoed like a heartbeat. Harry straightened his robes, ensuring the Addams crest inside his collar lay flat against his neck. Whatever came next, he was ready. After all, an Addams was never afraid of the dark, because the dark was afraid of an Addams. The door swung open to reveal a tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robes, her stern face surveying the new students with keen assessment. "The first years, Professor McGonagall," Hagrid announced. "Thank you, Hagrid," she replied. "I will take them from here." As she led them across the flagged stone floor, Harry observed everything with keen interest: the flaming torches, the magnificent marble staircase, the distant murmur of hundreds of voices from a doorway to the right. But it was the feeling of the castle itself that captivated him most: ancient magic humming in the very stones, secrets waiting in shadowed corners, history breathing in the drafty corridors. It felt, in the strangest way, like the Addams mansion, if the mansion had been expanded to magnificent proportions and populated with hundreds of magical students. There was the same sense of sentience to the building, the same whisper of mysteries behind closed doors. Professor McGonagall led them into a small chamber off the entrance hall, explaining about the sorting ceremony and the 4 houses: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. "Each house has its own noble history and has produced outstanding witches and wizards," she informed them. "While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule-breaking will lose points." Harry tilted his head slightly, considering this system. Rule-breaking in the Addams household was generally met with praise for initiative and creativity, provided it was done with style and purpose. This would require some adjustment. As McGonagall left them to prepare, excited whispers broke out among the first years. "How exactly do they sort us?" Harry asked Ron. "Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking." Harry nodded thoughtfully. "Pain can be clarifying," he remarked, repeating one of Uncle Fester's favorite phrases. "Though I doubt they'd risk permanent damage to new students." Ron gave him a sideways glance that suggested he wasn't entirely sure if Harry was joking. Several students behind them screamed suddenly, and Harry turned to see about 20 ghosts stream through the wall. Pearly white and slightly transparent, they glided across the room, arguing amongst themselves. "Forgive and forget, I say," a fat little monk was saying. "We ought to give him a second chance, my dear friar. Haven't we given Peeves all the chances he deserves?" interrupted a ghost with a ruff around his neck. "He gives us all a bad name and, you know, he's not really even a ghost." The friar suddenly noticed the first years. "New students," he exclaimed. "About to be sorted, I suppose?" A few people nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," the friar smiled. "My old house, you know." "Fascinating," Harry murmured, studying the ghosts with genuine interest. "The mansion has several spirits, but none so fully formed and conversational." The ghost with the ruff turned toward Harry, eyebrows raised. The mansion, you say? And what mansion might that be, young man? The Addams mansion, sir, Harry replied politely. My family home. We have ghosts from at least 3 centuries, though they tend to be more emotionally intense than your good selves. More wailing and rattling of chains. The ghost looked intrigued. Addams, you say? The name is not familiar to me among wizarding families. We exist somewhat adjacent to conventional magical society, Harry explained, using a phrase Gomez often employed when dealing with authorities. Our approach to the supernatural is perhaps more intimate. Intimate, the ghost repeated, looking increasingly curious. Before Harry could elaborate, Professor McGonagall returned. Move along now, she said sharply. The sorting ceremony is about to start. The ghosts floated away through the opposite wall, the one with the ruff giving Harry a parting look of interest. Now, form a line, Professor McGonagall instructed, and follow me. Feeling a mixture of anticipation and calm confidence that Gomez would have approved of, Harry fell into line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him. They walked out of the chamber, back across the entrance hall, and through a pair of double doors into the Great Hall. The Great Hall was magnificent beyond Harry's expectations, thousands of candles floating in mid-air, for long tables where the rest of the students sat, golden plates and goblets gleaming in the candlelight, and above it all, a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. It's bewitched to look like the sky outside, Hermione whispered. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history. Harry nodded appreciatively. Similar to the Addams Conservatory, though ours occasionally produces actual weather. Makes for interesting dinner parties when it decides to storm. Professor McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat, patched, frayed, and extremely dirty. Harry studied it with growing interest. This ordinary-looking object clearly held great power if it determined the course of students' lives at Hogwarts. His family had taught him to never underestimate seemingly innocuous things. After all, Thing was just a hand, and yet one of the most capable members of the household. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing, Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see, I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see, so try me on and I will tell you where you ought to be. As the hat sang about the qualities of each house, Harry listened attentively. Brave Gryffindor, loyal Hufflepuff, wise Ravenclaw, cunning Slytherin, each had their virtues, their place in the school's ecosystem. When the hat finished its song, the hall burst into applause. The hat bowed to each of the 4 tables and then became still again. So we've just got to try on the hat. Ron whispered to Harry, sounding relieved. I'll kill Fred, he was going on about wrestling a troll. Harry smiled slightly. A troll would have been interesting. We have a distant cousin who's half-troll on his mother's side. Charming fellow, if somewhat direct in his problem-solving approach. Ron stared at him, uncertain whether to laugh. Professor McGonagall stepped forward holding a long roll of parchment. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, she announced. The sorting began, with Abbott, Hannah, becoming a Hufflepuff and Bones, Susan, following her. Harry observed each student's reaction as they were sorted, relief, joy, nervous excitement, making mental notes about his future classmates. When Granger, Hermione, was called, the bushy-haired girl almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. After a moment's deliberation, the hat shouted, Gryffindor. Ron groaned beside Harry, who raised an eyebrow. Not your preferred house. It's not that, Ron muttered. It's just, she seems a bit intense, doesn't she? Intensity can be a virtue, Harry replied, thinking of Wednesday's single-minded focus when dissecting specimens. It suggests passion. As the sorting continued, Harry began to feel a flutter of genuine curiosity about where the hat would place him. The Addams family had always encouraged him to embrace all aspects of his nature, his courage, his intellect, his loyalty, and yes, his cunning. Where would the hat see him belonging? Potter Addams, Harry. As Professor McGonagall called his name, with a slight pause and frown at the modification, whispers suddenly broke out across the hall. Potter? Did she say Potter? The Harry Potter? Who's Addams? Harry stepped forward with the calm dignity Morticia had instilled in him, his back straight, his green eyes steady behind his glasses. As he sat on the stool, he caught a glimpse of the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him before the hat dropped over his eyes. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's interesting, but what's this? The hat's voice suddenly changed, becoming higher, almost alarmed. What manner of upbringing is this? Graves and poisons and, is that a severed hand serving breakfast? And these thoughts, these values, finding beauty in decay, power in darkness, joy in the macabre. Harry thought calmly, that's my family. The Addams family. I've sorted thousands of students, the hat continued, its voice now trembling slightly, seen into minds shaped by all manner of influences, but never, oh my, is that child performing surgery on a living bat? And you're assisting? My sister Wednesday, Harry explained mentally. She has a steady hand. Mother says her precision is remarkable for her age. The hat seemed to shudder on his head. There's bravery here, yes, but of a kind I've never encountered, not fear of danger, but a complete absence of normal fear. And intelligence, but applied to subjects that would terrify most wizards. Loyalty to a family that embraces what others flee from. And ambition, certainly, but not for conventional power or recognition. Harry waited patiently. He was used to people needing time to process the Addams way of life. I confess, Mr. Potter Addams, you challenge the very categories I was created to discern. Your mind has been shaped by influences that defy traditional sorting. Perhaps you could elaborate on what qualities each house might nurture in me. Harry suggested politely. My parents have always encouraged informed decision-making. Your parents, the hat repeated faintly. The ones who collect torture devices as hobbyists and dance in graveyards. They're very much in love, Harry pointed out. Their passion for each other and for life, in all its forms, is quite beautiful. The hat was silent for a long moment. In all my centuries of sorting, I have never encountered a mind like yours. You would change Hufflepuff beyond recognition. Ravenclaw would either embrace or reject your particular brand of intellectual curiosity. Slytherin, well, you have ambition and cunning, but your complete lack of concern for conventional power dynamics would confound your housemates. And Gryffindor. Yes. Harry prompted. You have courage in abundance, but not the kind Godric valued. You don't fear death or danger because you've been taught to see beauty in them. It's not bravery when you're genuinely unafraid. Harry considered this. My father says that true courage is facing the unknown with curiosity rather than fear. Isn't that what learning is about? Another long silence. Mr. Potter Addams, I believe the only solution is to let you choose. Where do you feel you belong? Harry thought about each house's values, about the students he'd observed being sorted, and about what his adoptive parents would advise. My father would probably enjoy the cunning of Slytherin, he mused. Mother would appreciate Ravenclaw's pursuit of knowledge. Uncle Fester would fit right in with Gryffindor's penchant for explosive experiments. And Grandmama's loyalty and work ethic would suit Hufflepuff. That doesn't narrow it down, the hat pointed out. Harry smiled beneath the hat's brim. I think, he decided finally, that Gryffindor would provide the most interesting contrast to my upbringing. The Addams family has taught me to embrace darkness, perhaps now I should explore the light. Are you certain? The hat asked, sounding almost concerned. Gryffindor will be, quite unprepared for someone like you. Growth comes from challenge, Harry replied, quoting Morticia. And besides, my birth parents were Gryffindors, weren't they? They were, the hat confirmed. Very well, if you're sure, Gryffindor. The hat shouted the last word to the entire hall. Harry removed it carefully and placed it back on the stool, noticing with slight amusement that it seemed to twitch away from his touch. The Gryffindor table erupted in cheers, though Harry didn't miss the slightly stunned expression on Professor McGonagall's face as she removed the hat from the stool with somewhat more caution than she had shown previously. As Harry made his way to the Gryffindor table, he was greeted by enthusiastic handshakes and backslapping. The Weasley twins were chanting, "We got Potter. We got Potter," and Percy the prefect pumped his hand vigorously. "Welcome to Gryffindor, Potter," Percy said pompously. "Potter Addams," Harry corrected yet again, taking a seat. "And thank you for the warm welcome." The rest of the sorting continued, with Ron joining Harry in Gryffindor as he'd hoped. When the ceremony concluded, Albus Dumbledore rose to his feet, beaming at the students with arms opened wide. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are, Nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. Thank you." As he sat back down, the tables suddenly filled with food. Harry examined the spread with interest: roast beef, roast chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, bacon, steak, potatoes, vegetables, and various condiments. It was all distinctly more conventional than Grandmama's cooking, which tended toward the exotic and occasionally mobile. Still, Harry served himself a selection, remembering Morticia's lessons on politeness. "That does look good," said the ghost in the ruff sadly, watching Harry cut into his steak. "Can't you?" Harry began. "I haven't eaten for nearly 500 years, the ghost explained. "I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. I don't think I've introduced myself. Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington at your service. Resident ghost of Gryffindor Tower." "I know who you are," Ron exclaimed suddenly. "My brothers told me about you, you're nearly headless Nick." "I would prefer you to call me Sir Nicholas de," the ghost began stiffly, but sandy-haired Seamus Finnegan interrupted. "Nearly headless? How can you be nearly headless?" Sir Nicholas looked extremely irritated. "Like this," he said, seizing his left ear and pulling. His whole head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder as if it was on a hinge. While several first-years gasped or looked away, Harry leaned forward with genuine interest. "Fascinating," he remarked. "The partial decapitation has preserved a unique physical state between life and death. My Uncle Fester would be most intrigued by the metaphysical implications." Sir Nicholas, who had clearly expected disgust or shock, blinked in surprise as he flipped his head back onto his neck. "Your uncle studies spectral manifestations?" "Among other things," Harry nodded. "Our family has always had an interest in the boundaries between worlds. We have several ghosts in residence at the mansion, though none with your particular condition." "How curious," Sir Nicholas murmured, studying Harry with newfound interest. "Perhaps we might discuss this further sometime. It's rare to find a young person with appreciation for the nuances of post-mortem existence." "I'd be delighted," Harry replied sincerely. As the feast continued, conversation flowed around various topics: family backgrounds, classes they were looking forward to, and eventually the faculty seated at the high table. Harry's attention was drawn to a hook-nosed professor with greasy black hair who was talking to a nervous-looking man wearing a purple turban. As Harry watched, the hook-nosed professor looked past his companion directly at him. A sharp, hot pain shot across the scar on Harry's forehead. "Ouch!" Harry clapped a hand to his head, the sensation so unexpected that it broke through his usual composure. "What is it?" Percy asked, looking concerned. "Nothing," Harry said, lowering his hand. "Just a momentary discomfort." "Who's that teacher talking to the man with the turban?" That's Professor Snape, head of Slytherin House. He teaches potions, though everyone knows he's after the defense against the dark arts job. And that's Professor Quirrell, who actually does teach defense. No wonder he's looking nervous. Snape can be quite intimidating. Harry studied Professor Snape with renewed interest. The pain in his scar had subsided, but the professor continued to glance in his direction occasionally, his expression unreadable. When the desserts appeared, Harry selected a small serving of something called treacle tart, curious about this traditionally British sweet that wasn't part of Grandmama's extensive dessert repertoire. The conversation around him turned to families. "I'm half and half," Seamus was saying. "Me dad's a muggle. Mam didn't tell him she was a witch till after they were married. Bit of a nasty shock for him." Others laughed, but Harry merely nodded thoughtfully. "Family secrets can be complex," he observed. "My adopted family has a tradition of revealing the full extent of the Addams heritage only to those who demonstrate they can appreciate our particular aesthetic." "What do you mean by aesthetic?" Hermione asked, her curiosity overcoming her earlier wariness. Harry considered how best to explain. The Addams family finds beauty and joy in aspects of life that many consider dark or frightening. Death, decay, the supernatural, these aren't things to fear, but to explore and celebrate. Several of his new housemates exchanged uncertain glances. "So they're like dark wizards?" Dean Thomas asked hesitantly. "Not in the conventional sense," Harry replied. "They don't seek power over others or practice malicious magic. They simply embrace the shadows as enthusiastically as they embrace everything else in life." He smiled, remembering Gomez's passionate declarations. "My father says that fear is a cage most people build around themselves, but an Addams knows that what waits beyond conventional boundaries is often the most exhilarating." The table had fallen into a slightly uncomfortable silence, which Percy broke by steering the conversation toward classes and academic expectations. When the desserts disappeared and Professor Dumbledore rose again to deliver start-of-term notices, Harry listened attentively, particularly to the warning about the third-floor corridor being off-limits. "And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song," Dumbledore announced cheerfully. Harry joined in the chaotic performance with enthusiasm, choosing a slow, melodic funeral dirge that Lurch often played on the harpsichord. The effect was rather eerie alongside the various upbeat tunes chosen by most students, but the Weasley twins, finishing last with their slow funeral march, gave Harry an appreciative nod for his similar choice. As Percy gathered the Gryffindor first-years to lead them to their dormitory, Harry felt a wave of anticipation. This strange, wonderful castle with its moving staircases, hidden passages, and ancient magic would be his home for the coming year, a new mansion of secrets to explore, new shadows to embrace, and new challenges to face. And he would face them as both a Potter and an Addams, the unique combination that had shaped him into who he was. That night, as Harry settled into his four-poster bed in Gryffindor Tower, he wrote a short letter home: "Dear Mother, Father, Wednesday, Pugsley, Uncle Fester, Grandmama, Lurch, Thing, and Cousin Itt, I've arrived safely at Hogwarts and been sorted into Gryffindor House, where my birth parents once studied. The castle is magnificent, full of ghosts, moving staircases, and centuries of magical history. I believe you'd all find it quite homey." The Sorting Hat seemed rather disturbed by my upbringing, which I take as a compliment to your excellent parenting. I've made some initial acquaintances who seem both intrigued and unsettled by the Addams way of life, a familiar reaction that I'm well prepared to navigate. Classes begin tomorrow. I'll write again soon with more details about my studies and any particularly interesting discoveries in this ancient castle. The family motto serves me well here: an Addams is never afraid of the dark, because the dark is afraid of an Addams. With love and shadows, Harry. He sealed the letter, ready for Edgar to deliver in the morning, and lay back on his pillow. Through the window beside his bed, he could see stars scattered across the night sky, so similar to the view from his tower bedroom at the mansion. Different location, same universe. Different family history, same essential self. Harry Potter Addams closed his eyes, the comfortable darkness welcoming him like an old friend, and dreamed of what tomorrow might bring. Chapter 2, The Hat's Horror. Harry woke before his dorm mates, a habit formed from years of early morning expeditions with Gomez. The sun hadn't yet risen, and Gryffindor Tower was wrapped in a kind of silence that felt alive, breathing, waiting, full of possibility. Just how he liked it. He dressed quietly and settled cross-legged on his bed, retrieving a small leather-bound book from his trunk. Its black cover was unmarked except for the Addams family crest embossed in silver. Morticia had given it to him the night before his departure. "Every Addams keeps a grimoire, darling," she told him, her pale fingers caressing the cover. "To record observations, experiments, and particularly interesting methods of subverting expectation." Harry opened to the first blank page and began to write, his quill scratching softly against the parchment. Hogwarts, Day 1. The castle breathes old magic. I can feel it in the stones, hear it in the corridors. Different from the mansion's sentience, more structured, yet wilder beneath. The Sorting Hat fears what it cannot categorize. Note, research whether inanimate magical objects can experience trauma. A soft rustling interrupted his writing. Edgar had returned from his night's hunting, swooping through the open window to land on Harry's shoulder, a small mouse dangling from his beak. "Successful expedition?" Harry whispered, stroking the raven's glossy feathers. Edgar gave a muffled caw of confirmation before swallowing his prize whole. "Good. I've got a letter for Mother and Father." As Harry attached his letter to Edgar's leg, Ron's bed curtains parted. The redhead blinked sleepily, hair sticking up at odd angles. "Blimey, you're up early," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Is that a raven eating a mouse on your shoulder?" "Edgar enjoys his breakfast fresh," Harry explained, watching as the raven took flight through the window. "Mother says it keeps his feathers especially glossy." Ron stared blearily. "Right. Forgot you had a raven instead of an owl." "The Addams family has always had an affinity for corvids," Harry said, closing his grimoire. "Grandmother Frump kept a murder of crows that she trained to follow unfaithful husbands. Very efficient messengers and surprisingly vindictive when motivated." "Brilliant," Ron said weakly, clearly unsure how seriously to take this information. By the time they reached the great hall for breakfast, the rest of the school was stirring to life. Harry selected a piece of toast and an apple, ignoring the heavier options. Grandmama had always emphasized the importance of a light breakfast before potentially poisonous activities, easier on the system when you're sampling new toxins, dear. "Have you looked at the schedule?" Hermione asked, appearing suddenly beside them with her own already memorized. "We've got Transfiguration first, then Charms, and Potions after lunch with the Slytherins." Harry nodded, sipping his pumpkin juice thoughtfully. Transfiguration should be fascinating. Uncle Fester once accidentally transformed himself into a three-legged stool for a week. Family legend says it was his most conversational period. Hermione opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "That's not. Transfiguration is a very precise magical art. Professor McGonagall is supposed to be strict but brilliant." "The best teachers often are," Harry agreed. "Grandmother Frump could make you recite poisonous fungi alphabetically while hanging upside down over a pit of quicksand. I never forgot a single variety." As they made their way to Transfiguration, Harry found himself the object of curious stares and whispered conversations. Students pointed at his forehead, huddled together to exchange rumors, or hastily moved aside as he passed. The attention didn't bother him. Growing up as an Addams, he was accustomed to people's reactions to the unusual. Professor McGonagall's classroom was immaculate and organized, with rows of desks facing a larger teacher's desk at the front. As students filed in, Harry selected a seat in the middle row, setting out his wand, parchment, and a small silver device that resembled a combination of compass and pocket watch. "What's that?" Ron asked, sliding into the seat beside him. "A memento mori clock," Harry replied, adjusting the delicate hands. "Father gave it to me." It's calibrated to remind the user of life's brevity at poetically appropriate moments. As if on cue, the clock emitted a soft, mournful chime. Harry nodded with satisfaction. Perfect. It's recognized we're about to undergo a transformative experience. The classroom door opened, and Professor McGonagall entered, her emerald robe swishing as she strode to the front. Her sharp eyes surveyed the class over square spectacles, lingering momentarily on Harry before she launched into her opening speech. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she warned. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. Harry sat straighter, appreciating her directness. Cousin ITT had always said that clear consequences were the foundation of educational excellence. After taking complex notes on transfiguration theory, they were each given a match to turn into a needle. Harry studied his match intently, remembering Morticia's lessons on focus and visualization. Magic flows from intention through imagination to manifestation, she'd instructed, guiding his small hands as they tended her carnivorous plants. See not what is, but what could be. Harry held his wand, his father's wand, and closed his eyes briefly, envisioning not just any needle, but a specific one, silver, ornate, with a tiny skull where the eye should be. The kind Morticia used for her more elaborate embroidery projects. He pointed his wand, whispered the incantation with precise articulation, and felt the magic flow from his core, down his arm, through the wand. The match shimmered, elongated, and transformed, not into the standard needle Professor McGonagall had demonstrated, but into an exquisite silver needle with an intricately detailed skull forming the eye. My word, Professor McGonagall said, suddenly appearing beside his desk. She picked up the needle, examining it with astonishment. Mr. Potter, this is unexpected. A complete transformation on your first attempt, with additional creative elements. Potter Addams, Harry corrected politely. Thank you, Professor. It's modeled after my mother's favorite embroidery needles. She uses them for her more elaborate morning samplers. Professor McGonagall's eyebrows rose so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. Indeed. She turned the needle, studying the skull detail. While I encourage precision in following instructions, I cannot deny this demonstrates remarkable talent. 5 points to Gryffindor for successful transfiguration, Mr. Potter. Addams. As she moved away to check other students' progress, Hermione leaned over, her expression a mixture of amazement and irritation. How did you do that? We've only just learned the basic theory. Harry shrugged modestly. The Addams family approach to magic is rather intuitive. Mother always says that transformation is about seeing the potential within the mundane and coaxing it forth through sheer conviction. By the end of class, only Hermione had also managed to make any change to her match, though it lacked the artistic embellishment of Harry's creation. As they left Transfiguration, Harry was aware of both admiring and wary glances from his classmates. His success had not gone unnoticed, nor had the distinctive nature of his transformed needle. That was brilliant, Ron said as they headed to Charms. Bit creepy with the skull and all, but brilliant. Thank you, Harry replied. The skull motif is something of a family tradition. Grandmother Frump's wedding china features a different skeletal design on each place setting. Makes formal dinners into delightful anatomy lessons. In Charms, Professor Flitwick, a tiny wizard who stood on a stack of books to see over his desk, squeaked in excitement when he reached Harry's name during roll call. Potter Addams, Harry, he exclaimed, toppling off his book pile in his enthusiasm. After Flitwick recovered, he set them to studying the theory of levitation charms, promising practical attempts in a future lesson. Harry took meticulous notes, occasionally adding observations in the margins of his parchment about how certain wand movements resembled the gestures Grandmama used when summoning spirits during the full moon. As the morning progressed, Harry found himself growing fonder of Hogwarts. The castle's ancient magic resonated with something in his soul, a recognition of power that existed in the shadows between worlds, not unlike the energy that pulsed through the Addams mansion. Lunch in the Great Hall provided a welcome break and an opportunity to observe his fellow students more closely. Harry selected foods that reminded him least of Grandmama's cooking, which meant avoiding anything with tentacles, unusual colors, or independent movement. "You eat like a bird," Ron commented around a mouthful of shepherd's pie. "Aren't you hungry?" "I have a specialized digestive system," Harry explained. "Grandmama has been building my tolerance to various toxins since I was young. She believes a properly calibrated poison threshold is essential for navigating treacherous social situations." Ron paused mid-chew. "She poisoned you? On purpose?" "Only therapeutically," Harry assured him. "Small, gradually increasing doses. It's an old family tradition. By age 9, I could consume twice the lethal dose of nightshade without more than a pleasant tingling sensation." Ron swallowed with visible effort. "That's educational." "Indeed. Though it does alter one's palate. I find standard cuisine rather bland by comparison." After lunch came the class Harry had been most curious about, potions with Professor Snape. The hook-nosed professor had continued to cast inscrutable glances toward Harry during meals, and the pain in his scar had briefly flared again during breakfast. The potions classroom was located in the dungeons, a fact that immediately endeared the subject to Harry. The Addams family had always appreciated good dungeon architecture, and Hogwarts was impressive: cool stone walls slick with moisture, the distant sound of chains, and the lingering scent of centuries of mysterious experiments. "Atmospheric," Harry murmured appreciatively as they took their seats. Professor Snape swept into the classroom, his black robes billowing behind him like bat wings. He moved with purpose to the front of the class and began roll call, his voice barely above a whisper yet commanding complete attention. When he reached Harry's name, he paused. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." "Potter Addams, sir," Harry corrected respectfully. "I prefer to honor both my birth and adoptive families." Snape's dark eyes fixed on Harry with an intensity that would have unsettled most first years. Harry met his gaze steadily, the way Morticia had taught him to observe venomous creatures, with respect rather than fear. "Indeed," Snape said after a moment. "How sentimental." He finished calling the roll and looked up at the class, his eyes cold and empty. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making. As there is little foolish wand-waving here, many of you will hardly believe this is magic. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, and snaring the senses." Harry leaned forward slightly, genuinely captivated. Snape's words echoed Grandmama's frequent soliloquies on the art of brewing. "I can teach you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stopper death, if you aren't as big a bunch of dunderheads as I usually have to teach." Silence followed this little speech. Harry nodded appreciatively. Dramatics were an essential component of effective education, according to Uncle Fester. Suddenly, Snape barked, "Potter! What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Hermione's hand shot into the air, but Harry was already answering, his voice calm and clear. "The draught of living death, sir. A powerful sleeping potion that simulates death so convincingly that only the most discerning observer can detect the subject's continued existence. Grandmama uses a variation when we play Wake the Dead at family gatherings, though her version includes essence of belladonna for the more vibrant hallucinations upon awakening." Snape's expression flickered with something between surprise and suspicion. "And where, Mr. Potter, would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar?" "In the stomach of a goat, sir," Harry replied promptly. Though Uncle Fester claims the most potent specimens come from goats raised in graveyards and fed exclusively on nightshade. The antidotal properties are apparently enhanced by the toxin exposure. Snape's eyes narrowed marginally. "What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane?" "They're the same plant, sir, also known as aconite. Mother grows it in our conservatory for its aesthetic appeal and practical applications." The poison extracted from the roots features prominently in several family recipes, particularly those reserved for unwelcome solicitors. The dungeon was completely silent. Snape stared at Harry for a long moment, something calculating in his gaze. "Correct," he finally said. "Though your supplementary information is unconventional, to say the least." He glanced around at the rest of the class. "Well, why aren't you all copying this down?" There was a sudden rummaging for quills and parchment. Over the noise, Snape added, "And a point to Gryffindor for Mr. Potter's unexpected preparedness." "Potter Addams, sir," Harry reminded him quietly. Snape's lip curled slightly. "Do not push your luck, Mr. Potter. Fame clearly isn't everything." For their practical work, Snape put them into pairs to mix a simple potion to cure boils. Harry was paired with Neville Longbottom, who looked terrified both of Snape and of the ingredients they were meant to prepare. "The key is precision with respect," Harry advised in a low voice as they began. "Potion's ingredients deserve the same courtesy as any other living, or formerly living, thing." I am just afraid I'll mess it up," Neville stammered, nearly dropping the dried nettles. "Fear is the enemy of accuracy," Harry said, quoting Grandmama. "Here, let me demonstrate." With deft fingers, Harry showed Neville how to crush the snake fangs to a perfectly fine powder, explaining as he worked. "Imagine each ingredient has a spirit that wants to contribute to the potion's purpose. Your job is to help it express its essential nature in the most effective way." To Neville's obvious surprise, this approach actually helped. His hands trembled less as they added the fangs to their cauldron and stirred carefully. "Where did you learn all this?" Neville whispered as they waited for their potion to simmer. "Grandmama began my potion education when I was 4, Harry explained. By 6, I could brew 7 distinct varieties of mild hallucinogens. Very useful for enhancing family game nights." Neville looked both impressed and disturbed, an expression Harry was quite familiar with from new visitors to the Addams mansion. Their potion was progressing nicely until the moment Neville reached for the porcupine quills. Harry, who had been measuring precisely 4 sprigs of dried lavender, noticed just in time. "Wait," he said quietly but firmly, catching Neville's wrist. "We need to remove the cauldron from the fire first." Neville froze, quills hovering dangerously close to the bubbling mixture. What happens if you add them while it's still on the fire?" "Nothing pleasant," Harry replied. "Unless you particularly enjoy acid-like eruptions and painful boils. Though Uncle Fester might consider that an attractive feature, I doubt Professor Snape would award extra credit for creative destruction." They carefully removed their cauldron from the fire, added the quills, and stirred counterclockwise. The potion turned the exact shade of blue described in their textbook. Snape swept past their table, glancing into their cauldron with a raised eyebrow. "Adequate," he commented, which seemed to be high praise considering his scathing remarks to other students. As they packed up their equipment at the end of class, Snape called out, "Potter. A word." Harry approached the professor's desk as the other students filed out, Ron lingering uncertainly by the door until Harry nodded that he should go ahead. "Yes, Professor?" Harry inquired politely. Snape studied him, dark eyes unreadable. "Your knowledge of potions' ingredients and their properties exceeds typical first-year understanding." "Thank you, sir." It wasn't necessarily a compliment. Snape's voice was cool. "I find myself curious about this. Addams family you're so eager to associate yourself with. They are not known in wizarding circles." Harry nodded. "The Addams family exists somewhat adjacent to conventional magical society, sir. Our approach to the supernatural and alchemical arts follows older traditions." "Older traditions," Snape repeated, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "And these traditions include feeding children belladonna and aconite? Teaching them to brew poisons?" "Only under proper supervision," Harry assured him. "Grandmama is very particular about measuring toxic doses appropriate to age and body weight." Something that might have been concern flickered across Snape's face, quickly masked. Mr. Potter, Potter Addams, Harry corrected again, very gently. Snape's jaw tightened momentarily. Mr. Potter Addams. I suggest you exercise caution in what aspects of your upbringing you choose to share at Hogwarts. Not all will understand family traditions involving recreational poisoning and corpse reanimation. Harry tilted his head slightly. Are you concerned for my social adjustment, Professor? I am concerned, Snape said precisely, about the potential disruption to my classroom should your classmates become unduly alarmed by your casually mentioned extracurricular activities. I understand, Harry nodded thoughtfully. Prudent compartmentalization of information based on audience readiness. Mother employs a similar approach when introducing new acquaintances to the family guillotine collection. Snape pinched the bridge of his nose briefly. You may go, Mr. Potter Addams. Try not to terrify any first-years before dinner. I'll do my best, Professor, Harry promised, though he couldn't help adding, unless, of course, they express interest in being terrified. Father always says that fear, properly cultivated, can be the most invigorating of emotions. As Harry left the dungeons, he reflected that Professor Snape was the most intriguing teacher he'd encountered so far, intense, dramatic, and with an appreciation for the darker aspects of magical education that resonated with the Addams philosophy. The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to exploring the castle. Harry's methodical approach to mapping the corridors, noting trick steps, and identifying secret passages impressed even the Weasley twins, who found him tapping experimentally on a suspicious-looking wall panel. Looking for shortcuts already, Potter Addams? Fred, or possibly George, asked. The architecture is fascinating, Harry replied. Buildings this old develop sentience of a sort. The mansion at home has distinct moods and preferences. I'm trying to understand Hogwarts' personality. The twins exchanged glances. Blimey, he might be onto something, George. Indeed, Fred. We've always suspected the castle plays favorites. Harry nodded seriously. Exactly. In the Addams mansion, the East Wing only opens certain doors during waning gibbous moons, and the dungeon occasionally rearranges itself when it's bored. I suspect Hogwarts has similar tendencies, though perhaps more subtle due to the constraints of being an educational institution. Fred and George looked at Harry with new appreciation. You know, George said thoughtfully, everyone's talking about you. The boy who lived, raised by a mysterious family no one's heard of, Fred continued. With peculiar habits and unsettling knowledge, George added. And a remarkable talent for magic already, Fred finished. Harry merely smiled. The Addams family tends to make an impression. We can see that, the twins said in unison. Before Harry could respond, a commotion down the corridor caught their attention. Peeves, the poltergeist, was terrorizing a group of first-year Hufflepuffs, pelting them with pieces of chalk and cackling madly. Ah, Peeves in his element, Fred observed with approval. Harry watched the poltergeist with genuine interest. A fascinating manifestation. Not quite ghost, not quite physical, existing in the in-between spaces. That's one way to describe the chaos demon, George chuckled. Harry stepped forward, approaching Peeves directly while the Hufflepuffs scattered. Potter Addams, careful. Fred called. Peeves doesn't show mercy to first-years. But Harry stood calmly as Peeves whirled to face him, the poltergeist's wicked grin widening at the prospect of a new victim. Ickle first eye all alone. Peeves cackled. What fun, what joy, what bones to break. Harry bowed formally from the waist, exactly as Gomez had taught him to greet supernatural entities of uncertain temperament. Peeves the poltergeist, a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I'm Harry Potter Addams, and I have a profound appreciation for beings who exist beyond conventional boundaries. Peeves froze in mid-air, chalk pieces suspended around him like a strange constellation. He drifted closer, studying Harry with narrowed, mischievous eyes. Potter Addamsy speaks pretty words to Peeves, he said suspiciously. Trying to trick poor Peeves? Not at all, Harry replied sincerely. The Addams family has always believed that chaos has its own vital role in maintaining cosmic balance. My Uncle Fester says that without occasional destruction, creation becomes stagnant. Peeves cocked his head, clearly intrigued. Addamsy has an uncle who likes breaking things. Breaking, exploding, reimagining structural integrity through creative demolition, Harry confirmed. Our family motto regarding renovations is, why use a door when a wall will do? A slow, delighted grin spread across Peeves' face. He swooped in circles around Harry, who remained perfectly composed. Addamsy understands Peeves, the poltergeist declared. Peeves likes Addamsy. With that, he scooped up his remaining chalk ammunition and zoomed off down the corridor, but not before performing a surprisingly graceful somersault and tipping an invisible hat to Harry. The Weasley twins stared in astonishment. Did you just make friends with Peeves? Not friends, precisely, Harry clarified. More like a mutual recognition of kindred philosophical approaches to institutional structures. Fred and George exchanged glances that suggested they'd found something unexpectedly valuable. Potter Addams, Fred said solemnly, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. By the end of the first week, Harry had established a reputation that left most of Hogwarts unsure whether to be impressed, terrified, or simply bewildered. His academic performance was impeccable. He demonstrated natural talent in transfiguration, answered questions in herbology that made Professor Sprout blink in surprise. Yes, Mr. Potter Addams, while mandrake roots can indeed be used to revive petrified victims, your suggestion about using them to create temporary zombification is, technically accurate but not part of our curriculum, and even managed to stay awake during History of Magic, taking detailed notes on goblin rebellions with particular attention to their creative torture methods. Only in defense against the dark arts did Harry show something less than enthusiasm. Professor Quirrell's stuttering lectures about defensive theory struck him as oddly contradictory to the man's obvious fear of his own subject. If you're afraid of vampires, Harry had asked politely after a particularly disjointed lesson, why not simply befriend them? Our Eastern European cousins have maintained productive relationships with the local vampire covens for centuries. Great Uncle Vulture even married one, though the relationship ended when she complained he was too pale. Quirrell had stared at him in horror before mumbling something about homework and hurrying from the classroom. More curious than Quirrell's reaction, however, was the fact that Harry's scar tended to prickle uncomfortably in the defense professor's presence, a phenomenon he documented meticulously in his grimoire, along with observations about which areas of the castle produced similar effects. When Friday evening arrived, Harry joined his fellow Gryffindors in the common room, where he'd been persuaded to teach them a card game popular in the Addams household. It's called Grave Consequences, he explained, shuffling a deck of ancient-looking cards decorated with ornate memento mori imagery. The objective is to build the most elaborate fictional demise while avoiding actual mortal peril. Actual mortal peril? Hermione repeated skeptically. From a card game? The deck is enchanted, Harry explained. Great Aunt Lucretia created it after a particularly dull funeral. The cards respond to the player's fears and desires, manifesting minor but instructive consequences for poor play. What kind of consequences? Ron asked warily. Harry dealt the cards with practiced precision. Nothing permanent. Temporary transmutations, mild hallucinations, ominous prophetic visions, the usual gaming stakes. Despite initial hesitation, several Gryffindors joined the game, which quickly became uproariously entertaining as the magical cards triggered effects ranging from Fred's hair standing straight up for 10 minutes to Lee Jordan briefly speaking in riddles that only Harry could understand. Percy the prefect observed with disapproval from across the room. I'm not sure this activity is entirely appropriate, he commented stiffly when Neville's ears turned temporarily into bat wings after a particularly poor play. On the contrary, Harry replied, helping Neville adjust to his new auditory appendages, it teaches strategy, consequence evaluation, and adaptability to unexpected physical alterations, all valuable life skills. Besides, the effects wear off at midnight or when the game concludes, whichever comes first. It's brilliant, George declared as his twin's nose elongated into an elephant-like trunk after a risky card combination. Absolutely inspired, agreed Fred, his voice now comically nasal. We need to market these. Harry smiled modestly. I'll write to Great Aunt Lucretia. She's always looking for new appreciation of her creations, especially since the regrettable incident with the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Board of Trustees. The game continued well into the evening, drawing an increasingly large audience as word spread through Gryffindor Tower. Even Hermione, initially skeptical, found herself enjoying the academic challenge of calculating optimal card combinations while avoiding the more dramatic consequences. By the time the clock struck midnight and all magical effects reversed themselves, much to the disappointment of Dean Thomas, who had been enjoying his temporary ability to speak to the common room furniture, Harry had cemented his place as an unusual but valued addition to Gryffindor House. As the common room emptied, Harry remained by the fire, adding new observations to his grimoire. He sketched a rough map of the castle sections he'd explored, noting points where he'd felt unusual magical resonances and marking potential secret passages for further investigation. Still awake, Potter Addams, came Percy's voice as the prefect made a final round before bed. Harry looked up from his writing. Just documenting the day's discoveries, Percy. The castle has so many secrets to uncover. Percy peered at Harry's notebook with mild curiosity. You're very systematic for a first year. Mother encourages thorough record-keeping, Harry explained. She says history is written by those who bother to write it down in the first place. Sound advice, Percy nodded, seeming to warm slightly to this display of academic diligence. Though you might want to focus more on your actual coursework than castle exploration. Harry tilted his head thoughtfully. Isn't learning about one's environment an essential part of education? Father always says that context shapes content. Well, yes, but, besides, Harry continued, understanding Hogwarts architecture might prove useful. The Addams mansion occasionally rearranges rooms when it's in a temperamental mood, and I've noticed similar tendencies here, particularly in the east corridors on the third floor. Percy frowned. The third floor is off-limits, as the headmaster clearly stated. The corridor on the right-hand side is off-limits, Harry corrected gently. I've been exploring the left. Though I did notice something interesting about the forbidden section, a distinctive magical resonance emanating from behind the locked door. Similar to the protection spells around Great Uncle Balthazar's cursed diamond collection, though with more layers. Percy's expression shifted from disapproval to alarm. You haven't tried to get in, have you? Of course not, Harry assured him. Father has very strong opinions about proper timing when investigating mysterious locked doors. Always wait for a thunderstorm, he says. Dramatic revelations deserve dramatic weather. Percy stared at Harry for a long moment. You're a very unusual boy, Potter Addams. Thank you, Harry replied with genuine pleasure. That's kind of you to say. The following morning brought Harry's first piece of mail since his arrival, a black envelope delivered by Edgar during breakfast, the Addams family crest stamped in silver wax on the back. The raven dropped it directly onto Harry's plate before helping himself to a piece of bacon from Ron's plate. Oi! Ron protested, though without much conviction. Harry opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter written on heavy parchment in Morticia's elegant, spidery handwriting. Dearest Harry, your letter brought such delightful news. Gomez and I are thrilled to hear of your sorting into Gryffindor, though we confess to some amusement at the Sorting Hat's distress. You've always had that effect on headwear, remember Cousin Phantom's funeral, when the mourning veils tried to flee the cemetery rather than adorn your head? Some magical objects simply lack the constitution to appreciate an Addams mind. The family sends their love. Wednesday has intensified her studies in preparation for her own magical education, whether at Hogwarts or elsewhere. Her latest experiment combining frog spawn and electrical current produced the most fascinating hopping burn marks across the nursery floor. Pugsley misses your assistance with his demolition projects but has found that thing makes an excellent fuse lighter in your absence. Uncle Fester asks if you've encountered any interesting varieties of explosive potions yet. and Grandmama has enclosed a small packet of her special blend of herbs to enhance your school meals. Do use it sparingly, as the nightshade content might be stronger than your classmates are accustomed to. Lurch has been mournfully playing Empty Nursery Blues on the harpsichord, which we find quite touching. We're eager to hear more about your studies and explorations. Remember that learning extends far beyond classroom walls. Some of life's most valuable lessons lurk in shadows and whisper from hidden passages. With darkest affection, Mother P.S. Your father sends his love, and this advice: when mapping secret passages, always mark the ones that bite. Harry smiled, running his fingers over the familiar handwriting. Attached to the letter was a small velvet pouch containing Grandmama's herb mixture, which emanated a faint purplish glow even through the fabric. "Is that from your family?" Hermione asked, eyeing the black envelope with curiosity. "Yes," Harry confirmed. "Mother sends news from home and some of Grandmama's special seasonings." He held up the pouch, and several nearby students leaned away instinctively as a wisp of something that might have been either smoke or tiny spectral figures escaped from the top. "Are those moving?" Neville asked nervously. "Grandmama's recipes often have a life of their own," Harry explained. "She believes food should be an active participant in the dining experience." "Right," Ron said weakly. "Just, maybe keep that away from the communal dishes, yeah." Harry carefully tucked the pouch into his robe pocket. "Of course. It would be impolite to alter everyone's meal without permission. Though I think the shepherd's pie would benefit enormously from just a pinch." After breakfast, Harry composed a reply to his family, detailing his first week of classes, his explorations of the castle, and his observations about his fellow students. He mentioned the pain in his scar around Professor Quirrell, knowing Morticia would find the psychosomatic manifestation intriguing from both magical and psychological perspectives. The weekend stretched before him, full of possibilities. The weather was perfect for outdoor exploration, overcast with a hint of impending storm, so Harry decided to investigate the grounds, particularly the edges of the forbidden forest that had caught his attention during their arrival. "Want to visit Hagrid with me?" Ron suggested as they left the Great Hall. "He sent me a note inviting us for tea." "That sounds pleasant," Harry agreed. "I've been curious about his role as groundskeeper. Father mentioned that he has a special rapport with dangerous creatures." As they crossed the grounds toward Hagrid's hut, Harry noticed a group of Slytherin first-years lounging near the lake. One of them, a pale boy with white blonde hair, nudged his companions as Harry and Ron passed. "Well, if it isn't Potter and his Weasley shadow," the boy called out. "Finally found someone who'll tolerate your bizarre behavior, have you?" Harry paused, studying the speaker with genuine interest. "You have a remarkable bone structure," he observed. "The kind of pronounced features that would present wonderfully in a death mask. Do you mind if I ask your name? I like to catalog interesting physiognomies for future reference." The blonde boy's smug expression faltered. "What are you on about?" "I'm Draco Malfoy." "Ah, Malfoy. French origin, mal-foi, bad faith. Historically associated with aristocratic lineages prone to dramatic endings." "Fascinating." Harry offered his hand. "Harry Potter Addams. A pleasure to make your acquaintance." Malfoy hesitated, clearly thrown off balance by this unusual response to his attempted mockery. After a moment, he shook Harry's hand briefly, then quickly withdrew as if worried about contamination. "Potter Addams," he repeated. "I've never heard of any Addams family in proper wizarding circles." "Proper circles can be so limiting, don't you think?" Harry replied pleasantly. "The Addams family tends to prefer more irregular geometric configurations in our social arrangements. Spirals, labyrinths, occasionally non-Euclidean structures when Great Aunt Cassiopeia visits from the adjacent dimension." Malfoy's two large friends, whom Harry mentally catalogued as gargoylesque, shifted uncomfortably. "You're mad," Malfoy concluded, though he sounded less contemptuous than uncertain. "Thank you," Harry smiled. "That's very kind. Madness runs in the family, sometimes it gallops, as Grandmama likes to say. Ron tugged at Harry's sleeve. Come on, we'll be late for Hagrid. Of course. Good day, Mr. Malfoy. Do consider sitting for a death mask portrait sometime. The family sculptor would be delighted to work with those cheekbones. As they walked away, Ron burst out laughing. Did you see his face? He didn't know whether to insult you back or run away. He seems conflicted, Harry observed. There's potential there, beneath the performative superiority. Mother always says that the most rigid facades often mask the most interesting interior landscapes. Or he's just a git, Ron suggested pragmatically. Hagrid's hut was a small wooden structure on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Smoke curled from the chimney, and enormous boots stood by the door. When Harry knocked, thunderous barking erupted from inside. Back, Fong, back. Hagrid's voice commanded before the door swung open to reveal his massive form. Harry. Ron. Come in, come in. The interior was cozy in its rustic way, one room with hams and pheasants hanging from the ceiling, a copper kettle boiling on the fire, and a massive bed covered with a patchwork quilt in the corner. A huge black boarhound bounded up to them, and while Ron looked nervous, Harry immediately knelt to greet the dog at eye level. Hello, Fong, he said solemnly, offering his hand palm up the way Morticia had taught him to approach the more temperamental residents of their family cemetery. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. Fong sniffed Harry's hand and then, instead of the enthusiastic jumping Hagrid had clearly expected, the boarhound whined softly and sat, regarding Harry with a mixture of caution and fascination. Well, I never, Hagrid said, looking impressed. Fong usually jumps all over visitors. Got away with animals, have ya? The Addams family has always valued interspecies communication, Harry explained, scratching behind Fong's ears in exactly the spot that made the dog's leg thump appreciatively. Cousin ITT speaks 17 non-human languages, including 3 dialects of Spider. Hagrid blinked, then laughed as if assuming this was a joke. Make yourselves at home, he said, pouring boiling water into a large teapot. And have a rock cake, made myself. The rock cakes lived up to their name, nearly breaking their teeth, but Harry nibbled politely, having developed strong jaw muscles from years of Grandmama's experimental baking. So, tell me about your first week, Hagrid encouraged, settling into a massive armchair that creaked alarmingly. As Ron launched into an animated account of their classes, Harry found his attention drawn to a newspaper clipping on the table. He picked it up while Ron described their transfiguration lesson, scanning the headline, Gringotts break-in latest investigations continue into the break-in at Gringotts on July 31st, widely believed to be the work of dark wizards or witches unknown. Gringotts goblins insist that nothing was taken. The vault in question, number 713, had in fact been emptied earlier that same day. Hagrid, Harry interrupted politely, what's this about a Gringotts break-in? Hagrid wouldn't meet Harry's eyes, suddenly very interested in his teacup. Just some troublemaker tryin' to get at something that wasn't there anymore. Nothin' important. The article says Vault 713 was emptied the same day, Harry observed. Quite a fortunate coincidence. Hagrid shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, well, lucky that. Very lucky. Indeed, Harry agreed, his mind working. Almost as if someone knew the vault might be targeted and removed its contents just in time. Hagrid abruptly changed the subject, asking Ron about his brothers. But Harry continued to ponder the article, adding it mentally to his growing collection of curiosities at Hogwarts, the forbidden third-floor corridor, his occasionally painful scar, and now a thwarted robbery attempt at Gringotts. As they walked back to the castle later, Ron was chatting about Quidditch, but Harry's thoughts remained on connections and coincidences, concepts that Gomez had taught him were rarely as random as they appeared. The universe conspires in patterns, his father often declared, gesturing dramatically with his cigar. And Addams never ignores the whispers of synchronicity. The following week brought their first flying lessons, scheduled with the Slytherins on Thursday afternoon. Harry had been looking forward to this class with particular enthusiasm. The idea of defying gravity through sheer willpower and a somewhat sentient wooden stick appealed to his Addams sensibilities. Flying is the closest living experience to haunting, Great Uncle Phantasm had once told him during a particularly spirited family reunion. The fact that Uncle Phantasm had been dead for 40 years at the time lent his opinion considerable weight. The lesson was held on a flat lawn opposite the Forbidden Forest, whose trees swayed darkly in the distance. Madam Hooch, their instructor, had short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. "Well, what are you all waiting for?" she barked. "Everyone stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up." Harry stood beside a rather battered-looking broom, studying its worn handle and uneven twigs with interest. He could feel a faint hum of magic within it, old, reluctant, but present. "Stick out your right hand over your broom," called Madam Hooch, "and say, 'Up.'" "Up," everyone shouted. Harry's broom jumped immediately into his hand, vibrating slightly as if surprised by its own enthusiasm. He smiled, stroking the handle soothingly the way he might calm one of the mansion's more excitable decorative gargoyles. "Hello," he whispered to it. "I suspect we'll get along splendidly." Only a few other students had managed to summon their brooms successfully. Hermione's merely rolled over, and Neville's hadn't moved at all. "You need to command with confidence," Harry advised them quietly. "Brooms, like most magical objects, respond to conviction." Aunt Ophelia's haunted vacuum cleaner once followed her commands so enthusiastically it sucked up the entire East Wing curtain collection and 3 unfortunate houseguests. After everyone had finally gotten hold of their brooms, Madam Hooch showed them how to mount without sliding off the end, then walked up and down the rows correcting grips. Harry was pleased when she nodded approvingly at his naturally correct positioning. "Now, when I blow my whistle, you kick off from the ground, hard," Madam Hooch instructed. "Keep your broom steady, rise a few feet, and then come straight back down by leaning forward slightly. On my whistle, 3, 2, but Neville, nervous and jumpy, pushed off before the whistle touched Madam Hooch's lips. He rose straight up like a cork from a bottle, 12 feet, 20 feet, his scared white face looking down at the ground falling away from him. Harry watched with concern as Neville slipped sideways off his broom and, wham, landed with a thud and a nasty crack. Madam Hooch rushed to his side, her face as white as Neville's. "Broken wrist," she muttered. "Come on, boy, it's all right, up you get." She turned to the rest of the class. "None of you move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. You leave those brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say, Quidditch. Come on, dear." As soon as they were out of earshot, Draco Malfoy burst into laughter. "Did you see his face, the great lump?" Other Slytherins joined in, but Harry observed the scene with a tilted head, his expression thoughtful. "Did you notice the broom's reaction?" he asked no one in particular. "It bucked like the decorative rocking horse in our nursery, the one that tried to throw Pugsley through the window during the full moon. I suspect some of these school brooms have developed peculiar personalities after years of student interaction." Malfoy, annoyed that his mockery had been interrupted by this bizarre observation, spotted something glinting in the grass. "Look! It's that stupid thing Longbottom's Gran sent him." He snatched up Neville's Remembrall, which glowed scarlet in his palm. "Give that here, Malfoy," Harry said calmly, stepping forward. "I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find," Malfoy sneered. "How about, up a tree?" "I wouldn't advise that," Harry replied, his voice taking on the peculiar resonance that Morticia had taught him for communicating with particularly stubborn spirits. Objects that belong to others tend to develop resentments when mishandled. In the Addams mansion, several items stolen by an unfortunate burglar rearranged themselves to spell out rather creative threats on his bedroom wall the following night. Malfoy hesitated, something in Harry's tone making him glance down at the Remembrall, which seemed to glow a shade darker. But pride won out over momentary unease. "Scared, Potter Addams?" "Not at all," Harry smiled. "Though I do find it interesting that you keep seeking my attention. Mother says that antagonism often masks a desire for connection." Malfoy's pale face flushed pink. "You're mental," he snapped, mounting his broom and taking off. He hadn't been lying about his flying ability. He handled the broom with natural grace as he hovered level with the topmost branches of a nearby oak. "Come and get it, Potter Addams." Harry assessed the situation calmly. While he had no fear of heights, he'd spent many pleasant afternoons on the Addams mansion's Widow's Walk, which swayed alarmingly in strong winds. He did recognize that flying without instruction presented certain risks. On the other hand, he had an inexplicable confidence in his ability, and Neville's property deserved respect and protection. "Harry, don't," Hermione cautioned. "You heard what Madame Hooch said, besides, you've never flown before." "Actually," Harry corrected her gently, "I've had some experience with levitation. Uncle Fester's experimental jet pack provided quite an educational afternoon before it exploded." Before anyone could object further, Harry mounted his broom and kicked off from the ground. Air rushed through his hair as he soared upward. This was, he realized immediately, absolutely natural to him. A joy unlike anything he'd experienced before flooded through him as he pulled his broomstick up a little to take it even higher. He turned his broom sharply to face Malfoy in midair. The Slytherin looked stunned. "Interesting, isn't it?" Harry called conversationally. "How physical aptitudes can surface unexpectedly. Rather like Cousin Dolores discovering her talent for firewalking during that regrettable incident with the spontaneously combusting carpet." "What are you babbling about?" Malfoy demanded, though he looked increasingly uncertain. "Just observing patterns," Harry replied. "Now, about that remembrall, I think returning it would be the most elegant solution to our current impasse." "Oh yeah?" Malfoy's sneer returned. "Catch it if you can, then." He threw the glass ball high into the air and streaked back toward the ground. Harry tracked the ball's arc with the same focus Wednesday applied to her more delicate dissections. Time seemed to slow as he leaned forward, pointing his broom handle down. He was gathering speed in a steep dive, racing the ball as it fell. Wind whistled in his ears, mingling with screams from watching students. With graceful precision, he stretched out his hand. A foot from the ground he caught it, just in time to pull his broom straight, toppling gently onto the grass with the remembrall clutched safely in his fist. Harry Potter Addams. His heart sank faster than his recent dive. Professor McGonagall was running toward them, her face a mask of shock. Never, in all my time at Hogwarts, she seemed almost speechless with shock, her glasses flashing furiously. "How dare you, might have broken your neck." "It was Malfoy, Professor," Ron interjected. "Be quiet, Mr. Weasley." But Malfoy took Neville's remembrall. "That's enough. Potter Addams, follow me, now." Harry handed the remembrall to Ron. "Please return this to Neville with my regards," he said calmly before following Professor McGonagall toward the castle. He walked silently beside her, his mind already considering the various consequences that might await him. Expulsion seemed possible, though he wondered if the Addams family connections in the educational world might be of assistance. Great-Aunt Desdemona had once convinced an entire school board to reverse a ruling through what Father euphemistically called aggressive persuasion techniques. To his surprise, Professor McGonagall led him not to her office but to a classroom, where she asked Professor Flitwick if she could borrow wood for a moment. Harry wondered briefly if this was a euphemism for some arcane disciplinary implement until a burly fifth-year boy emerged from Flitwick's class looking confused. "Potter Addams, this is Oliver Wood," McGonagall introduced. "Wood, I've found you a seeker." What followed was a conversation that Harry found both surprising and intriguing. Rather than punishment, he was being offered a position on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Apparently his dive for the remembrall had demonstrated natural talent rarely seen in first years. "He caught that thing in his hand after a 50-foot dive," Professor McGonagall told Wood, who now looked as though all his dreams had come true at once. "Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it." "Was that your first time on a broomstick, Potter Addams?" "On a magical broomstick, yes," Harry confirmed. "Though I did once ride a rather spirited mop during Grandmama's experimental cleaning potion incident. It achieved remarkable velocity before crashing through the conservatory ceiling." McGonagall and Wood exchanged glances but chose not to pursue this statement further. He's just the build for a seeker, too, Wood was saying as he walked around Harry, examining him. Light, speedy, we'll need to get him a decent broom, Professor, a Nimbus 2000 or a Cleansweep 7, I'd say. I shall speak to Professor Dumbledore about bending the first-year rule, McGonagall agreed. Heaven knows, we need a better team than last year. Flattened in that last match by Slytherin, I couldn't look Severus Snape in the face for weeks. She peered sternly over her glasses at Harry. I want to hear you're training hard, Potter Addams, or I may change my mind about punishing you. Then she suddenly smiled. Your father would have been proud, she said. He was an excellent Quidditch player himself. Harry tilted his head curiously. You knew my birth father well, Professor. A shadow passed over McGonagall's face. I taught both your parents, Potter Addams. They were exceptional students and fine people. She hesitated, then asked with careful neutrality, these Addamses who raised you. Are they good to you? The question surprised Harry, but he answered truthfully. The Addamses saved me, Professor. They've given me love, education, and a place to belong. They've taught me to see beauty where others see only darkness, to question rather than fear, and to embrace all aspects of life, and death, with equal enthusiasm. McGonagall studied him, something complicated happening behind her spectacles. I see, she said finally. Well, they've certainly produced a unique young man. Harry smiled. Thank you, Professor. That's the highest compliment an Addams can receive. News of Harry's appointment as Seeker spread quickly, despite Wood's attempts at secrecy. The Weasley twins found him at dinner, declaring it brilliant and promising to ensure no bludgers knocked him off his broom during practice. We haven't won the Quidditch Cup since Charlie left, Fred told him. But this year's team is going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry, Wood was almost skipping when he told us. I still don't understand why I wasn't expelled, Harry admitted. The rules seemed quite clear. George grinned. McGonagall would do just about anything to see Slytherin lose the Quidditch Cup. Anything. Besides, Fred added, from what we've heard, that dive you did was practically suicidal, and coming from us, that's saying something. Not suicidal, Harry corrected thoughtfully. The Addams family doesn't fear death so much as disrespect it through carelessness. There's a difference between calculated risk and foolish endangerment. The twins exchanged glances. Right, they said in unison, before heading further down the table. Harry had just begun his dinner when Malfoy approached, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Enjoying your last meal, Potter Addams? When are you getting the train back to your freak family? Harry regarded him with genuine curiosity. You're still seeking my attention. How interesting. Malfoy flushed. I'd take you on any time on my own, he said. Tonight, if you want. Wizard's duel. Wands only, no contact. Harry considered the proposal. A duel has certain formal requirements in the wizarding world, I presume. In the Addams family, duels traditionally involve a selection of medieval weaponry and a minimum of 3 witnesses to ensure proper medical attention or last rites, as necessary. Malfoy looked momentarily thrown off balance. What? No, just wands. Midnight in the trophy room, it's always unlocked. Before Harry could respond, Ron jumped in. I'm his second, who's yours? Malfoy sized up Crabbe and Goyle. Crabbe. Be there, unless you're too scared. Why would midnight be preferable to a properly scheduled and supervised encounter? Harry asked, genuinely puzzled. The Addams family believes in conducting conflicts with appropriate ceremony and documentation. Grandmother Frump always insists that proper dueling etiquette includes printed invitations and refreshments for spectators. Malfoy stared at him. Are you accepting or not? I'm afraid I must decline on procedural grounds, Harry replied politely. Without proper preparation, witnesses, and ceremonial arrangements, it would dishonor the tradition of formal conflict resolution. However, I'd be happy to discuss alternative methods of addressing your apparent need for interaction. Malfoy's face contorted with frustration. You're backing out because you're afraid. On the contrary, Harry smiled serenely. I'm suggesting that if we're going to engage in potentially lethal combat, we should do it with style and appropriate documentation. Perhaps after consulting our respective seconds about suitable terms. You're mental, Malfoy declared, stalking away with Crabbe and Goyle in tow. Ron stared at Harry. You just turned down a duel because it wasn't fancy enough. I turned down what was clearly an ill-conceived trap, Harry corrected mildly. Midnight in a remote part of the castle. With no formal preparations. Father would be appalled at such poor strategic thinking on my part if I'd agreed. You think it was a trap? Obviously. Though I appreciate your willingness to serve as my second, Harry added. That was quite loyal of you. Ron flushed slightly. Yeah, well. That's what friends do, right? Harry smiled, genuinely touched. Indeed. Later that evening, as Harry prepared for bed, he added the day's events to his grimoire, noting with particular interest his apparently natural affinity for flying. He also sketched McGonagall's expression when she'd asked about the Addamses, capturing the mixture of concern and curiosity that had crossed her features. There was clearly more to learn about his birth parents and their connection to Hogwarts, information that might help him understand his place between two worlds, the loving darkness of the Addams family and the complex legacy of the Potters. As he closed his grimoire, a thought occurred to him, one that would have made Gomez proud in its recognition of patterns. The third-floor corridor was forbidden. The Gringotts break-in targeted an emptied vault. Hagrid's discomfort when discussing the break-in. 3 seemingly disconnected events, yet an Addams was trained to see connections where others saw only coincidence. Harry smiled to himself as he drew his bed curtains closed. Hogwarts was proving to be every bit as intriguing as the Addams mansion, full of secrets waiting to be uncovered by those who knew how to listen to the whispers in the shadows. October arrived, bringing with it a chill in the castle corridors that reminded Harry pleasantly of the mansion's east wing in winter. Between classes and Quidditch practice, he settled into a rhythm at Hogwarts, though he maintained his habit of exploration and documentation in the grimoire, which was filling rapidly with observations, sketches, and theories. Would prove to be a demanding Quidditch captain, scheduling practices 3 evenings a week. Harry took to the sport with natural talent, his reflexes and spatial awareness honed by years of navigating the mansion's more treacherous architectural features. You're a natural flyer, Wood declared after a particularly successful practice session where Harry had caught the snitch a dozen times without missing once. It's almost uncanny how you seem to sense where the snitch will be before it gets there. Thank you, Harry replied modestly. Wednesday and I used to play a similar game with her collection of mechanically animated insects. They were larger and occasionally carnivorous, but the principle seems transferable. Wood blinked. Right. Well, keep it up, Potter Addams. At this rate, we'll flatten Slytherin in our first match. The only thorn in Harry's otherwise pleasant adjustment to Hogwarts was the ongoing mystery of his occasionally painful scar, which seemed to react most strongly in Professor Quirrell's vicinity. During a particularly dull defense against the dark arts lesson about werewolf identification, the pain had been sharp enough that Harry had made a small sound, drawing concerned glances from Ron and Hermione. Are you all right? Hermione whispered as Quirrell stuttered through an explanation of lunar-influenced transformations. Just a momentary discomfort, Harry assured her. Though it's curious that it happens most frequently in this classroom. Hermione frowned. Maybe you should tell someone. Madame Pomfrey in the hospital wing, or Professor McGonagall. Harry considered this. Perhaps. Though I've been documenting the occurrences in my grimoire, and there's a pattern emerging that I'd like to understand better first. What kind of pattern? Ron asked, leaning in. The pain intensifies when Professor Quirrell's back is to us, Harry explained quietly. particularly when his turban is directly in my line of sight. It's quite specific. That's odd, Hermione admitted. Maybe you're allergic to whatever he uses to wrap it. He said he got it from an African prince as a thank you for dealing with a zombie, remember? An implausible narrative, Harry replied thoughtfully. His reaction to my question about vampire relations suggests limited actual field experience with the undead or partially deceased. Before they could discuss it further, Quirrell had approached their table, his nervous gaze darting between them. "PP paying attention, are we?" he stuttered. "Yes, Professor," Hermione answered promptly. "We were just discussing werewolf identification techniques." "Gee good, good," Quirrell nodded, though his eyes lingered on Harry with an expression that seemed almost calculating beneath the nervousness. As he turned away, Harry felt the now familiar stabbing pain in his scar. "Did you see that?" he whispered to Ron and Hermione once Quirrell was out of earshot. "See what?" Ron asked. His expression changed for a moment. There was something different behind the stuttering facade. Hermione looked skeptical. "Harry, I think you're reading too much into things. Professor Quirrell may not be the most engaging teacher, but he's still a professor at Hogwarts. Dumbledore wouldn't have hired him if he wasn't qualified." Harry merely nodded, but made a mental note to continue his observations. The Addams family had a long tradition of looking beneath surfaces, literally in the case of Uncle Fester's archaeological excavations through the mansion floors, but metaphorically as well. As Halloween approached, the castle was decorated with the usual festive trappings, floating pumpkins, live bats, and orange streamers. Harry found it all rather cheerfully macabre, though lacking the artistic depth of Addams' family Halloween celebrations, which typically involved actual spectral manifestations and at least one accidental resurrection. On Halloween morning, Harry woke to the delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. Even better, Professor Flitwick announced in charms that they were ready to start making objects fly, something Harry had been eagerly anticipating since he'd watched the professor make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. They were put into pairs, Harry with Seamus Finnegan, Ron was paired with Hermione, much to their mutual dismay. Professor Flitwick gave each pair a feather to practice with. "Now, don't forget that nice wrist movement we've been practicing," squeaked Professor Flitwick. "Swish and flick, remember, swish and flick. And saying the magic words properly is very important, too." Harry observed the room as students began attempting the charm. Most were struggling with either the movement or pronunciation, though Hermione was coaching Ron with rather overbearing precision. When it came to Harry's turn, he regarded the feather thoughtfully. "Grandmama always says that levitation is as much about convincing an object it wants to rise as forcing it to do so," he commented to Seamus. "Like persuading a reluctant ghost to stop rattling chains and engage in more constructive haunting activities." Seamus looked baffled but nodded politely. Harry performed the wand movement with elegant precision, enunciating clearly, Wingardium Leviosa. The feather rose steadily from the desk, hovering 4 feet above their heads. But rather than simply floating there, it began to move in an intricate pattern, tracing what appeared to be a stylized raven in flight before returning gently to the desk. Professor Flitwick clapped in delight. "Oh, well done. Everyone see here, Mr. Potter Addams has done it, and with artistic flourish. Excellent control." Harry smiled modestly. "Thank you, Professor. I was merely suggesting a direction rather than mandating one. Objects have their own preferences for movement, I've found." By the end of class, only Hermione had also successfully levitated her feather, though without Harry's decorative elaborations. As they left the classroom, Ron was in a foul mood after his unsuccessful attempts and Hermione's correction of his pronunciation. "It's no wonder no one can stand her," he said to Harry as they pushed their way into the crowded corridor. "She's a nightmare, honestly." Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past. It was Hermione, and Harry caught a glimpse of her face, streaked with tears. "I think she heard you," Harry observed quietly. Ron looked uncomfortable. "So? She must have noticed she's got no friends." Friendship is a complex negotiation, Harry replied thoughtfully. Wednesday once locked Pugsley in the Iron Maiden for 3 days, and they emerged with a stronger sibling bond. Perhaps your confrontational dynamic with Hermione is simply finding its equilibrium. Ron stared at him. Your family is seriously weird, mate. Thank you, Harry smiled. That's very kind. Hermione didn't appear in their next class, nor was she seen all afternoon. On their way to the Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Parvati Patil telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. She's been in there all afternoon, Parvati added. Ron looked even more awkward at this news but seemed determined not to acknowledge his role in the situation as they entered the Great Hall. The Halloween decorations were impressive. 1,000 live bats fluttered from the walls and ceiling while 1,000 more swooped over the tables in low black clouds, causing the candles in the pumpkins to stutter. The feast appeared suddenly on golden plates, as it had at the start of term banquet. Harry was just serving himself a baked potato when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall, his turban askew and terror on his face. Everyone stared as he reached Professor Dumbledore's chair, slumped against the table, and gasped, "Troll, in the dungeons, thought you ought to know." He then sank to the floor in a dead faint. The hall erupted in panic, silenced only when Dumbledore produced several purple firecrackers from his wand. "Prefects," he rumbled, "lead your houses back to the dormitories immediately." As Percy began self-importantly shepherding the Gryffindors, Harry suddenly grabbed Ron's arm. "Hermione," he said simply. "What about her? She doesn't know about the troll." Ron bit his lip, guilt finally catching up with him. "Oh, all right," he snapped. "But Percy'd better not see us." They slipped down a deserted side corridor, hurrying toward the girls' bathroom. They had just turned the corner when they heard quick footsteps behind them. "Percy," hissed Ron, pulling Harry behind a large stone griffin. Peering around it, however, they saw not Percy but Professor Snape. He crossed the corridor and disappeared from view. "What's he doing?" Harry whispered. "Why isn't he down in the dungeons with the rest of the teachers?" "Search me." They crept along the next corridor after Snape's fading footsteps. "He's heading for the 3rd floor," Harry noted with interest. But they had more pressing concerns than Snape's destination. They had just turned another corner when a revolting smell reached their nostrils, a mixture of old socks and the kind of public toilet no one cleans. And then they heard it, a low grunting, and the shuffling footfalls of gigantic feet. At the end of a passage, they spotted it, 12 feet tall, its skin a dull, granite gray, its lumpy body like a boulder with a small coconut perched on top, dragging a huge wooden club. "The troll," Ron breathed, his face pale. The troll stopped next to a doorway and peered inside. It waggled its long ears, making up its tiny mind, then slouched slowly into the room. "The key's in the lock," Harry observed. "We could lock it in." "Good idea," Ron agreed nervously. They edged toward the open door, mouths dry. With a great leap, Harry managed to grab the key, slam the door, and lock it. "Yes!" Ron exclaimed. Flushed with their victory, they started to run back up the passage, but as they reached the corner they heard something that made their hearts stop, a high, petrified scream coming from the chamber they'd just locked. "Hermione," they said together. It was the girls' bathroom. Harry didn't hesitate. He unlocked the door and they ran inside. Hermione Granger was shrinking against the wall opposite, looking as if she was about to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking sinks off the walls as it went. "Confuse it," Harry said to Ron, and seized a tap. He threw it as hard as he could against the wall. The troll stopped a few feet from Hermione. It lumbered around, blinking stupidly, to see what had made the noise. Its mean little eyes saw Harry. It hesitated, then made for him instead, lifting its club as it went. "Oi, pea-brain," yelled Ron, throwing a metal pipe at it. The troll didn't even seem to notice the pipe hitting its shoulder, but it heard the yell and paused again, turning toward Ron instead. Harry seized the moment to run around the troll and pull Hermione toward the door. "Come on, run," he urged, but she couldn't move, still flat against the wall with her mouth open in terror. The troll was now confused by the shouting and echoes. It roared again and started toward Ron, who was nearest and had no way to escape. Harry acted instinctively, employing a tactic that had served him well during the mansion's occasional incursions by territorial forest creatures. He took a running jump and managed to fasten his arms around the troll's neck from behind, using his momentum to swing himself onto its shoulders. The troll couldn't feel Harry hanging there, but it noticed when Harry's wand, still clutched in his hand, went straight up one of its nostrils. Howling with pain, the troll twisted and flailed its club, with Harry clinging on for dear life. "Interesting anatomical discovery," Harry called down to Ron, remarkably composed despite the violent swinging. "Troll nasal cavities are surprisingly spacious." Hermione had sunk to the floor in fright. Ron pulled out his own wand, not knowing what he was going to do. Then, he heard himself cry the first spell that came into his head, Wingardium Leviosa. The club flew suddenly out of the troll's hand, rose high into the air, turned slowly over, and dropped, with a sickening crack, onto its owner's head. The troll swayed on the spot and then fell flat on its face with a thud that made the whole room tremble. Harry got to his feet, remarkably unruffled for someone who had just been violently thrown from a troll's shoulders. He retrieved his wand from the troll's nose, wiping it on the creature's trousers. "Troll mucus," he observed with scientific interest as he examined the grayish lumps on his wand. "Grandmama would be fascinated by its viscosity. I wonder if it has alchemical properties." A sudden slamming and loud footsteps made the three of them look up. Professor McGonagall had come bursting into the room, closely followed by Snape and Quirrell. Quirrell took one look at the troll, let out a faint whimper, and sat quickly down on a toilet, clutching his heart. Snape bent over the troll. Professor McGonagall was looking at Harry and Ron with an expression that combined fury, shock, and, perhaps, a hint of grudging admiration. Her lips were white. "What on earth were you thinking?" she demanded, cold fury in her voice. "You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory?" Then a small voice came from the shadows. "Please, Professor McGonagall, they were looking for me. Miss Granger." Hermione had managed to get to her feet at last. "I went looking for the troll because I thought I could deal with it on my own, you know, because I've read all about them." Harry's eyebrows rose slightly at this unexpected falsehood from rule-abiding Hermione. A fascinating development in her character. "If they hadn't found me, I'd be dead now," she continued. Harry stuck his wand up its nose and Ron knocked it out with its own club. "They didn't have time to come and fetch anyone. It was about to finish me off when they arrived." Professor McGonagall stared at them all for a long moment. "Well, in that case," she said, "Miss Granger, you foolish girl, how could you think of tackling a mountain troll on your own? 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor for this." She turned to Harry and Ron. "As for you two gentlemen, well, not many first years could have taken on a full-grown mountain troll and lived to tell the tale. 5 points will be awarded to each of you for sheer dumb luck." Harry shook his head slightly. "Not luck, Professor," he corrected politely. "Strategic application of previously acquired knowledge. My cousin Balthazar once wrestled a similar creature that emerged from Great Aunt Dementia's experimental portal in the basement. The key is to target sensory organs and utilize the creature's own momentum against it." All three professors stared at him, Quirrell with what might have been alarm, Snape with narrowed suspicion, and McGonagall with a mixture of disbelief and resignation. "Be that as it may, Mr. Potter Addams," she said finally, "I suggest you return to Gryffindor Tower, where the Halloween feast is being continued." As they left the bathroom, none of them spoke until they were 2 floors up. It was Hermione who broke the silence. "Thank you," she said in a small voice. "Both of you." "No problem," Ron replied, his ears reddening. "Though, you know, we did just save your life. You might not have needed saving if we hadn't locked the troll in with you," Harry pointed out fairly. Though it did provide an excellent opportunity to observe troll physiology at close range. I'll have to add my observations to my grimoire. Hermione and Ron exchanged glances, but something had shifted in their dynamic. From that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot mountain troll is one of them. As they reached the portrait of the fat lady, Harry thought once again of the patterns forming around him, Snape heading toward the third-floor corridor during the troll incident, the painful reactions of his scar, the Gringotts break-in. But now, he had two friends to help him unravel the mysteries of Hogwarts, one with encyclopedic knowledge and analytical skills, the other with wizard-raised practical understanding. Perhaps, he mused as they entered the common room to the buzz of excited conversation about the troll, this was how the Addams family had started, a collection of uniquely gifted individuals finding common purpose in exploring the shadows that others feared to acknowledge. Chapter 3, Family Values. November arrived at Hogwarts, wrapping the mountains in icy gray and the lake in steel. Frost crystallized on the castle windows each morning, forming patterns that Harry found reminiscent of the exquisite ice sculptures Morticia created each winter in the family graveyard. Perfect Quidditch weather, Oliver would declared enthusiastically during one particularly frigid early morning practice, his breath forming clouds in the air. The kind that preserves your focus by threatening frostbite. Harry, hovering on his new Nimbus 2000, a gift that had arrived mysteriously at breakfast the previous week, nodded in agreement. Cold had never bothered him, not after the character-building winters in the Addams mansion, where heating was considered an unnecessary modern indulgence and the best remedy for chills was, according to Grandmama, vigorous sword practice followed by a bracing shot of distilled nightshade. As the first Quidditch match, Gryffindor vs. Slytherin, approached, Harry found himself the center of increasing attention. Word had spread that he would be playing Seeker, and opinions were sharply divided on whether he would be brilliant or humiliate himself spectacularly. Ignore them, Hermione advised as they walked to potions one morning, passing a group of Slytherins making exaggerated swooning motions to suggest Harry falling off his broom. They're just trying to unnerve you. I find their creative visualization techniques quite inspiring, Harry replied mildly. Though Cousin ITT would suggest more dramatic flair, perhaps some theatrical death rattles or melodramatic final words. Ron snorted. You're mental, you know that. Most people would be nervous wrecks right now. Nervousness implies uncertainty about one's capacity to face outcomes, Harry said, quoting Uncle Fester. And Addams welcomes all possibilities with equal enthusiasm. In truth, Harry was looking forward to his first official match with keen anticipation. The day before the game, he received an unexpected delivery during breakfast, a long, thin package wrapped in midnight blue paper tied with silver ribbon, accompanied by a black envelope bearing the Addams family crest. What's that? Ron asked through a mouthful of porridge as Harry carefully untied the ribbon. Something from my family, Harry replied, opening the envelope first. Inside was a letter in Gomez's bold, slashing handwriting, my boy. News of your Quidditch appointment reached us through our European connections. You remember Cousin Vlad in Romania, the one with the unusual dietary restrictions? Capital achievement. The Addams competitive spirit lives on. Morticia and I discussed suitable equipment for your sporting debut, and we've taken the liberty of sending along a few family heirlooms to enhance your strategic advantage. Nothing that violates the letter of the rules, of course, we checked the regulations most carefully. Though I must say, wizarding sport rulebooks have far fewer delightful loopholes than Mortician indoor croquet or exsanguination badminton. We've also arranged a little surprise for your first match. The family never misses a significant milestone. Play with passion, my boy. Remember what great-grandmother Desdemona always said about competition: victory without terrifying your opponents is merely bookkeeping. Your proud father, Gomez Addams. P.S. Wednesday has been experimenting with creating her own broom from the haunted willow in the cemetery. 3 test pilots have disappeared so far, but she's quite encouraged by the progress. Harry smiled, tucking the letter away before carefully unwrapping the package. Inside was a sleek black case with silver fixtures. When he opened it, Ron gasped audibly. Blimey! The case contained what appeared at first glance to be standard Quidditch gear, but with distinctly Addams modifications. The protective gloves were made from supple black leather with silver-tipped fingers, embossed with tiny ravens along the knuckles. A pair of goggles with smoked lenses were nestled beside them, the frames intricately carved with patterns of interlocking bones. Most impressive was a sleek black helmet with silver accents that resembled delicate vertebrae running from front to back. That's the fanciest Quidditch gear I've ever seen, Ron marveled, reaching out to touch the helmet before drawing back uncertainly. It's not, cursed or anything, is it? Not cursed, Harry assured him, examining the items with appreciation. Though the gloves appear to be made from thestral hide, very rare and particularly responsive to the wearer's intentions. And the helmet. He turned it, revealing a small silver plaque inside. Ah, it belonged to Great-Uncle Corvus, who played for the Transylvanian Terrors in the 1850s. The what? Ron frowned. A regional Eastern European team known for their unconventional night games and unusually high opponent injury rate, Harry explained. Though the records are somewhat incomplete due to the unfortunate spontaneous combustion of their statistical archives. Hermione, who had been listening with growing concern, leaned forward. Harry, are you sure these items are allowed? I've read Quidditch Through the Ages, and there are strict equipment regulations. Father checked the rulebook thoroughly, Harry assured her. These enhance protection rather than performance, perfectly legitimate. The Slytherins wear similar protective gear, I've noticed. Not like this, they don't, Ron muttered, eyeing the helmet's vertebrae design with a mixture of awe and unease. That evening in the Gryffindor common room, Harry was rereading Quidditch Through the Ages, which Hermione had lent him, when Professor Snape limped through the crowd of students, his dark eyes scanning until they landed on Harry. What's that you've got there, Potter? Harry held up the book. Quidditch Through the Ages, Professor. Last-minute research before tomorrow's match. Snape's eyes narrowed as he spotted the distinctive helmet sitting beside Harry on the couch. And what, pray tell, is that? Family heirloom, sir. Protective headgear for the match. Snape studied the helmet's unusual design, his expression unreadable. I trust you've verified its compliance with school equipment regulations? Of course, Professor, Harry replied politely. It contains no enchantments affecting speed, agility, or perception, merely standard cranial protection with aesthetic family modifications. Something like reluctant amusement flickered across Snape's face. Aesthetic indeed. He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, a word of advice, Potter Addams. Some might find your family's distinctive approach to sporting attire intimidating. Use that to your advantage. Before Harry could respond, Snape had confiscated Hermione's book on a technicality about library books not being taken outside and limped away, leaving Harry puzzled by this unexpected tactical suggestion from the head of the opposing house. What's wrong with his leg? Harry wondered aloud. Dunno, but I hope it's really hurting him, Ron muttered bitterly. Harry frowned thoughtfully. The injury appears recent. And considering his appearance during the troll incident. He glanced toward the window, where darkness had fallen. I think I'll retrieve Hermione's book. It seems only fair. Don't bother, Hermione began, but Harry was already standing. Father always says that calculated risk is the spice of an otherwise predictable existence, he said with a small smile. Besides, I've been meaning to test the mansion's infiltration techniques on Hogwarts architecture. He slipped from the common room before his friends could protest further. The corridors were dimly lit and mostly deserted as Harry made his way toward the staff room, moving with the silent precision Gomez had taught him during their midnight exploration games in the mansion. He had almost reached his destination when he heard voices from inside, Filch and Snape. Harry pressed himself against the wall, employing the shadow-merging technique that had served him well during hide-and-seek games with Wednesday. Blasted thing, Snape was saying. How are you supposed to keep your eyes on all three heads at once? Harry's interest peaked immediately. 3 head suggested a Cerberus or similar multi-headed guardian creature, exactly the sort of entity that would require careful strategic approach. Filch was providing bandages as Snape lifted his robes above his knee, revealing a bloody, mangled leg. "That beast is more trouble than it's worth," the caretaker grumbled. "It's guarding something valuable enough to justify the risk," Snape replied tightly. Though if certain parties would cease their meddling, he broke off abruptly, his head snapping toward the door. Harry was already gliding away, Hermione's book forgotten as he processed this new information. A 3-headed creature guarding something valuable, and Snape had attempted to get past it during the Halloween troll diversion. The pieces were aligning into a pattern that any Addams would recognize as worthy of investigation. Back in the common room, he shared his discovery with Ron and Hermione in hushed tones. "So that's it," Hermione whispered excitedly. "The 3-headed dog is guarding whatever was in that Gringotts vault, the one that was broken into. And Snape's trying to steal it," Ron concluded with certainty. Harry tilted his head thoughtfully. "Perhaps. Though in my experience, apparent villains sometimes have complex motivations. Great-Uncle Talon was once discovered ransacking the family crypt at midnight, but it turned out he was merely retrieving Grandmother Frump's secret recipe book, which she'd been buried with by mistake." "This isn't some weird family misunderstanding," Ron insisted. "Snape's trying to get past that dog, and he got bitten trying to steal whatever it's guarding." "But what is it guarding?" Hermione wondered. "Something valuable and potentially dangerous," Harry mused. The Addams family vault contains several artifacts of similar description: great-grandmother Desdemona's soul-trapping music box, Uncle Fester's collection of spontaneously combusting gemstones, and of course, the ancestral cursed dagger that only stops bleeding its victims when it considers their apology sincere. Ron and Hermione stared at him. "Your family has some serious issues with proper storage of dangerous items," Hermione said finally. Harry smiled. "Thank you. That's one of the highest compliments an Addams can receive." The Quidditch stadium hummed with anticipation as students and faculty filled the stands beneath a clear, cold November sky. In the Gryffindor changing room, Harry adjusted his Addams heirloom equipment while Wood delivered his pre-match speech. "This is it," the captain declared, pacing before his team. "The big one. The one we've all been waiting for." "We know Oliver's speech by heart," Fred Weasley told Harry. "We were on the team last year." "Shut up, you two," Wood admonished before turning to Harry. "Ready for your debut, Potter Addams?" Harry nodded, securing the vertebrae-adorned helmet. With his smoked goggles and silver-tipped gloves, he presented a rather striking figure, less the innocent first year and more a harbinger of aerodynamic doom. "Excellent," Wood approved, though he eyed the equipment with mild concern. "Those are definitely regulation, right?" "Completely," Harry assured him. Though Great-Uncle Corvus did establish an unusual record for opposing seekers mysteriously losing their nerve mid-game. Father says he had a particularly unnerving smile. Wood blinked, then shook his head. "Right. Well, just catch the snitch before Higgs does, and we'll call it a success regardless of how many Slytherins you terrify in the process." As they marched onto the field, Harry scanned the crowded stands, wondering what surprise Gomez had mentioned in his letter. His question was answered immediately when he spotted a section of the stands that seemed to have undergone a dramatic transformation overnight. Where ordinary spectator benches had been, there now stood what could only be described as a miniature version of the Addams mansion's front parlor, complete with ornate Gothic chairs, black velvet draperies despite the outdoor setting, and a large banner bearing the Addams family crest alongside a Gryffindor lion that appeared to be grinning with distinctly carnivorous intent. And there, in the center of this transplanted piece of home, sat the Addams family in their formal spectating attire. Gomez in a pinstriped suit with a blood-red carnation, Morticia in a flowing black gown that somehow billowed dramatically despite the lack of wind, Wednesday and Pugsley in matching funeral formal wear, Uncle Fester with what appeared to be a self-illuminating viewing device of his own invention, and Lurch looming behind them all like a particularly somber mountain. Harry's heart leapt with genuine joy. He raised a gloved hand, and the family responded with enthusiastic waves, Gomez actually leaping to his feet to perform an elaborate fencing salute with an épée that had materialized in his hand. Several nearby Hufflepuffs were staring at the Addams family display with undisguised alarm, particularly when things scurried up the banner to adjust its position for better visibility. "Is that a disembodied hand?" Angelina Johnson asked weakly, following Harry's gaze. "Thing," Harry confirmed with affection. "The most helpful member of the household." Before further questions could be asked, Madam Hooch called for the captains to shake hands. Wood and the Slytherin captain, Flint, gripped each other's hands as though hoping to break fingers. "Mount your brooms, please," Madam Hooch directed. Harry swung his leg over his Nimbus 2000, feeling the familiar thrill of anticipation. At Madam Hooch's whistle, 15 brooms rose into the air, and the game began. "And the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive, too, Jordan." "Sorry, Professor." The Weasley twins' friend, Lee Jordan, was providing match commentary, closely watched by Professor McGonagall. Harry circled above the action, scanning for the snitch while keeping one eye on Terence Higgs, the Slytherin seeker. From his elevated position, he could see the Addams family clearly. Gomez appeared to be commenting enthusiastically on each play, occasionally leaping from his seat in excitement. Morticia watched with elegant composure, occasionally whispering to Wednesday, who was taking notes with scientific intensity. Pugsley seemed to be constructing something from parts Uncle Fester handed him, while Lurch remained impassive, occasionally adjusting the binoculars he held to his eyes with surprising delicacy. "Slytherin in possession," Lee Jordan was saying. "Chaser Pusey ducks 2 Bludgers, 2 Weasleys, and Chaser Bell, and speeds toward the—" Wait a moment, was that the snitch? A murmur ran through the crowd as a flash of gold passed Adrian Pusey's left ear. Harry saw it immediately and Dove, streaking past Chasers and Bludgers with precise control. Higgs had seen it too, and they hurtled neck and neck toward the glinting ball. All the Chasers seemed to forget their roles as they hung in mid-air to watch. Harry was faster than Higgs, he could see the tiny fluttering wings, he was gaining, wham. A roar of outrage rose from the Gryffindors as Marcus Flint deliberately blocked Harry, sending his broom spinning off course. "Foul," screamed the Gryffindors. Madam Hooch spoke angrily to Flint and ordered a free shot at the Slytherin goal posts for Gryffindor. In the confusion, the snitch had disappeared again. From the Addams family box, Gomez's voice carried clearly, "Excellent strategic contact." Though traditionally one uses a sharpened broom end for maximum effect. The Romanian Cup final of 1754 featured no fewer than 12 impalement attempts. Nearby spectators edged away from the Addams section. Lee Jordan was finding it difficult to remain impartial. "So, after that obvious and disgusting bit of cheating, Jordan," growled Professor McGonagall. "I mean, after that open and revolting foul, Jordan, I'm warning you, all right, all right. Flint nearly kills the Gryffindor seeker, which could happen to anyone, I'm sure." Harry grinned behind his goggles at Jordan's commentary. The match continued, and he resumed his snitch search, executing a graceful loop to avoid a bludger that came pelting his way. It was then that it happened. His broom gave a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to fall. He gripped tighter with both hands, never having felt anything like this before. It happened again, his broom was trying to buck him off. Harry's Nimbus was zigzagging through the air, making violent swishing movements that nearly unseated him. No one seemed to notice at first, the Nimbus carried him higher and higher, away from the game. Curious, Harry mused with academic detachment despite his precarious position. Selective targeting of a specific broom suggests directed magical interference rather than general enchantment failure. His analytical observation was interrupted by another violent jerk that nearly dislodged him. He now hung from the broom with just one hand, swinging dangerously. The crowd had noticed by now. People were pointing up at him as his broom rolled over and over, jerking and twitching. The Weasley twins flew up to try and pull Harry safely onto one of their brooms, but every time they got near, the nimbus would jump higher. They dropped lower and circled beneath him, obviously hoping to catch him if he fell. In the Addams box, however, the reaction was markedly different. Rather than showing concern, the family appeared to be treating the dangerous situation as premium entertainment. Gomez was on his feet, cigar clenched between his teeth, shouting encouragement, "Magnificent aerial control, my boy. Your great-uncle Icarus would be proud." Morticia, watching with glittering eyes, commented audibly, "Such elegant danger. He has your balance, Gomez. And your affinity for peril, Querida." Gomez replied, kissing her arm fervently. Wednesday, meanwhile, was sketching the scene rapidly in a black notebook, muttering about calculating terminal velocity variables. Only Uncle Fester showed any practical response to the situation, producing what appeared to be a cannon-sized slingshot that he was aiming toward Harry while Pugsley loaded it with what looked alarmingly like a small explosive device. In the stands, Hermione had seized Hagrid's binoculars and was frantically scanning the crowd rather than looking at Harry. "What are you doing?" moaned Ron, gray-faced. "I knew it," Hermione gasped. "Snape, look." Ron grabbed the binoculars and spotted Snape in the middle of the stands opposite. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering non-stop under his breath. "He's jinxing the broom," Hermione explained. "What do we do?" "Leave it to me." As Hermione disappeared, Harry was employing every aerial acrobatic technique Gomez had taught him during their midnight bungee-jumping sessions from the mansion's Widow's Walk. Despite the broom's violent attempts to dislodge him, he maintained his grip with the specialized thestral-hide gloves, which seemed to adhere to the broomstick with each determined thought of "hold fast." Through his smoked goggles, Harry spotted Hermione's bushy hair moving through the crowd toward Snape. He watched as she reached the professor's row and crouched behind him. A moment later, bright blue flames appeared on the hem of Snape's robes. It took perhaps 30 seconds for Snape to realize he was on fire. A sudden yelp confirmed it had worked. Scooping the fire off him into a little jar, Hermione scrambled back along the row. Harry felt his broom stop vibrating. He swung himself back on with the casual grace of someone who regularly navigated the mansion's collapsing staircases for fun. With control restored, he immediately spotted something that made his heart leap, the snitch, hovering near the Slytherin goal posts. He dove toward it, accelerating with perfect precision. The Slytherin seeker, noticing his sudden movement, raced to intercept, but Harry had too much of a head start. As he neared the ground in his steep dive, spectators gasped, certain he would crash. At the last possible moment, Harry pulled up, balancing perfectly on his broom as he extended his hand. In a move that would later be described as either brilliant or completely deranged, by Quidditch commentators, he actually stood up on his broomstick, arms extended for balance, and stepped forward to pluck the snitch from the air with elegant precision. The stadium erupted in confusion and then thunderous applause as Harry held the snitch aloft, still standing perfectly balanced on his hovering broomstick. "Harry Potter Addams has caught the snitch!" Lee Jordan shouted. Gryffindor wins 170 points to 60. From the Addams box came the most enthusiastic response of all, Gomez performing what appeared to be a victory saber dance while Uncle Fester celebrated by setting off small explosions that sent sparks cascading over nearby spectators. Morticia applauded with dignified appreciation, while Wednesday allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Pugsley seemed disappointed that his emergency projectile hadn't been needed, while Lurch played a mournful victory dirge on a portable organ that had somehow materialized beside him. As Harry floated back to Earth, he was mobbed by his teammates, all exclaiming over his unorthodox capture technique. "Never seen anything like it." Wood kept repeating, wiping tears of joy from his eyes. "Standing on your broom. At your age." Technically against regulation, Percy Weasley pointed out as he joined them on the field, though he couldn't hide his grin. "But as you maintained contact with the broom through your feet rather than levitating independently, I suppose it counts." The celebration was briefly interrupted when Flint landed nearby, still arguing furiously. "He didn't catch it, he nearly swallowed it. That's not a proper capture." I assure you, the snitch was secured using only my hand, Harry replied politely. Though Cousin Raven once won the Carpathian Invitational by catching the snitch in his teeth after his arms were temporarily transfigured into serpents by a creative opposing beater. The bizarre specificity of this response left Flint momentarily speechless, an effect Harry had noticed his family anecdotes often produced. As the teams dispersed toward the changing rooms, Harry found himself surrounded by his family, who had made their way onto the field with characteristic disregard for conventional barriers. Gomez seized him in an enthusiastic embrace. "Spectacular performance, my boy. Absolutely capital. The way you handled that cursed broom, perfect." Addams sang Freud under pressure. Morticia glided forward to kiss his forehead. "Darling, you were magnificent. Such elegant danger. I particularly enjoyed the moment when death seemed most imminent." "Thanks, Mother," Harry smiled, genuinely pleased. The equipment was perfect, the gloves especially. I couldn't have maintained my grip without them. Wednesday regarded him with her usual solemn intensity. "Your broom was jinxed using a puppeteer's contortion curse. I recognized the motion pattern. Very advanced magic requiring sustained eye contact and continuous incantation." Harry raised his eyebrows, impressed by his sister's analysis. "You've been studying." She nodded. "I've expanded my curriculum in preparation for my own magical education. The conventional texts are disappointingly mild, but the volumes in Great Aunt Maleficia's library have proved more instructive." "My glorious family," Gomez declared, throwing his arms wide to include all of them. "Celebrating Harry's triumph together, as it should be. Tonight, we feast in your honor, my boy. I've prepared a special celebratory stew," Grandmama announced, appearing suddenly from behind Lurch with a bubbling cauldron that emitted ominous purple smoke. Locally sourced ingredients, that charming forest on the grounds provided the most fascinating fungi. Several passing Hogwarts students gave the steaming cauldron horrified glances. "Perhaps we should continue this celebration somewhere more private," Harry suggested diplomatically. "The castle has excellent facilities for family gatherings." "Capital idea." Gomez agreed, puffing his cigar. "Lead on, my boy. Show us this educational establishment that's been shaping your magical development." As Harry led his family toward the castle, he became aware of a small crowd following at a careful distance, his fellow Gryffindors, clearly torn between curiosity about the infamous Addams family and the instinctive caution that their appearance inspired. McGonagall intercepted them at the entrance hall, her expression a complex mixture of professional courtesy and personal wariness as she addressed Gomez and Morticia. "Mr. and Mrs. Addams, welcome to Hogwarts. I'm Professor McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress and Harry's head of house." "Enchanted, Professor," Gomez proclaimed, seizing her hand and kissing it with European flourish. "Absolutely delighted. Your educational establishment has provided our Harry with such stimulating opportunities for growth, jinxed sporting equipment, three-headed guard dogs, mountain trolls in the facilities. Marvelous character-building experiences." McGonagall's eyes widened slightly. That is, Harry writes so enthusiastically about his classes," Morticia interjected smoothly. "Particularly Transfiguration. His childhood experiments with transforming the garden statuary prepared him well, it seems." "Yes, well, Mr. Potter Addams has demonstrated considerable natural talent," McGonagall acknowledged, regaining her composure. "Though his creative modifications to standard transformations are somewhat unorthodox." "Orthodoxy is the refuge of the unimaginative," Gomez declared, quoting one of the Addams family's favorite philosophers. "We've always encouraged Harry to explore the boundaries of conventional limitation." "So I've gathered," McGonagall replied dryly. "The headmaster would like to meet you, if you'd be so kind as to follow me." As they proceeded through the castle, Harry observed the varied reactions of students they passed: fascination, alarm, and in some cases, recognition. Several pure-blood students from ancient families actually bowed respectfully to Morticia, suggesting the Addams reputation extended into certain wizarding circles despite their peripheral relationship to magical society. Dumbledore's office was accessed through a moving spiral staircase behind a gargoyle, an architectural feature that prompted Gomez to exclaim, "Marvelous. Reminds me of Cousin Esmeralda's digestive tract sculpture, same rotational principle." The headmaster himself awaited them, resplendent in midnight blue robes embroidered with silver stars. His eyes twinkled behind half-moon spectacles as he welcomed the Addams family with perfect equanimity, seemingly unfazed by their unusual appearance. "Mr. and Mrs. Addams, what a pleasure to meet Harry's adoptive parents at last," he greeted them, extending his hand. "Albus Dumbledore, at your service." "Headmaster Dumbledore." Gomez pumped his hand enthusiastically. "Your reputation precedes you. Supreme Mugwump, Grand Sorcerer, impressive titles. We Addamses appreciate a man of distinction." "You're very kind," Dumbledore smiled, turning to Morticia with a respectful inclination of his head. "Mrs. Addams, I must say, your influence on young Harry is most evident in his elegant composure under pressure." "You're too generous, Headmaster," Morticia replied with a gracious nod. "Harry was born with natural poise. We merely encouraged his inherent affinity for the unusual and macabre." "Indeed," Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "His unique perspective has certainly enlivened our classrooms." Professor Flitwick was particularly impressed by Harry's creative approach to the levitation charm, though the animated paper raven circling the chandelier took some time to dispel. While the adults conversed, Wednesday had gravitated to a perch near Fawkes, Dumbledore's phoenix, studying the bird with clinical interest. "Cyclical rebirth through combustion," she observed. "Fascinating biological adaptation. Have you measured the temperature of the flames during transformation?" Dumbledore turned to her with delight. "What an excellent scientific question, young lady. I confess I've never thought to take precise measurements, though the heat is sufficient to ignite my beard if I stand too close." "I'd like to observe the process," Wednesday stated matter-of-factly. "Controlled immolation with guaranteed resurrection offers unique research opportunities." "Perhaps at a future visit," Dumbledore suggested diplomatically. "Fawkes chooses his own timing for burning days, I'm afraid." "Headmaster," Harry interjected, "my family was hoping to celebrate my Quidditch victory with a small gathering. Would the room of requirement be suitable? I discovered it during my architectural explorations of the 7th floor." Dumbledore's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. "The room of requirement? Most students spend years at Hogwarts without discovering its existence. When did you happen upon it, Harry?" 3 weeks ago, Harry replied. "I was documenting the castle's magical resonance patterns and noticed a peculiar fluctuation in the corridor wall. After testing various approach methods, I discovered the room materializes when you walk past thinking about what you need. It's similar to the shifting parlor in our East Wing, though more responsive to specific mental parameters." "Indeed," Dumbledore nodded, looking impressed. "The room would be perfect for a family celebration. Though perhaps I should alert the house elves to expect some unconventional culinary contributions." He glanced at Grandmama's still bubbling cauldron. "Most considerate," Morticia agreed. "Grandmama's recipes often have unexpected effects on the unprepared palate. Gives character." Grandmama cackled. "Nothing builds intestinal fortitude like a good mystical fungus stew." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with what Harry recognized as genuine amusement rather than the polite tolerance most adults displayed toward Addams family customs. "I look forward to sampling it myself," the headmaster declared. "I've always believed that culinary adventure expands not just the palate but the mind." Gomez clapped him on the back enthusiastically. "A kindred spirit. We must introduce you to the family's ancestral Amontillado, aged 300 years in the catacombs beneath our cemetery." As they made their way to the 7th floor, Harry led his family through the castle with the confident familiarity of someone mapping its secrets for weeks. He pointed out hidden passages, architectural curiosities, and areas of particular magical significance that he documented in his grimoire. The moving staircases operate on a semi-predictable rotation pattern influenced by day of the week and lunar phase, he explained as they navigated upward. Though they occasionally demonstrate what appears to be sentient mischief, particularly toward students rushing to exams. Architectural personality, Gomez nodded approvingly. Essential in any proper dwelling. Our conservatory has a similar sense of humor. Remember when it trapped that door-to-door salesman for 3 days in the Venus flytrap corridor? He emerged with a much deeper appreciation for carnivorous botany, Morticia reminisced fondly. When they reached the blank wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy attempting to train trolls for ballet, Harry paced back and forth 3 times, concentrating on exactly what they needed. A door materialized, ornately carved with the Addams family crest. Perfect visualization, Harry, Morticia praised as he opened the door. Inside, the room of requirement had transformed itself into a perfect replica of the Addams mansion's grand dining hall, complete with the ancestral portrait gallery, mounted swords and battle axes on the walls, candelabras dripping with wax, and a long ebony dining table set for a feast. The enchanted ceiling mirrored the great hall's starry sky, though with the addition of stylized storm clouds occasionally illuminated by silent lightning. Magnificent! Gomez declared, striding in with arms wide. Absolutely capital reproduction. Down to great-grandmother Desdemona's disapproving glare from her portrait. The portrait in question, which the room had somehow conjured from Harry's detailed memory, indeed showed a severe-looking woman whose painted eyes seemed to follow them with haughty disdain. House elves appeared with trays of food, seamlessly incorporating Grandmama's contributions with Hogwarts fare. The resulting spread was a curious hybrid of traditional wizarding cuisine and Addams family specialties, treacle tart alongside what appeared to be pulsating gelatin molds, roast beef next to something that might have been squid tentacles in an unnaturally violet sauce. As the celebration got underway, Harry's Gryffindor friends cautiously joined the gathering. Ron and Hermione entered first, followed by the Weasley twins, who seemed particularly eager to meet the family responsible for Harry's unique worldview. "So you're the famous Hermione," Morticia greeted, extending a pale hand. "Harry writes that your analytical mind rivals Wednesday's, though applied to less morbid subjects." Hermione, looking both flattered and uncertain, shook her hand. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Addams. Harry's told us so much about your family." "All horrifying, I hope," Morticia smiled. "Absolutely," Hermione confirmed weakly. Ron was being enthusiastically questioned by Gomez about wizard chess, pieces that destroy each other. "Magnificent. Though our family set uses actual miniaturized weapons and real blood effects, while Fred and George had found a kindred spirit in Uncle Fester, who was describing various explosive compounds with scientific precision. The key is proper nitration, Fester was explaining earnestly. Too much, and you lose fingers unnecessarily. Too little, and you get disappointing blast radius. Brilliant, breathed Fred and George in unison. Pugsley, meanwhile, had cornered Neville Longbottom and was interrogating him about magical plants with toxic properties, while Wednesday methodically interviewed Professor McGonagall, who had accompanied Dumbledore to the gathering, about the more lethal aspects of advanced transfiguration. So theoretically, she was saying, one could transfigure a person's lungs into something non-functional while leaving the rest of the body intact. McGonagall looked torn between horror at the question and reluctant admiration for the girl's precise understanding of magical theory. Transfiguration of that nature would be strictly controlled by the Ministry, young lady. The ethical implications alone, ethics are situational, Wednesday interrupted flatly. Great Uncle Balthazar always said that moral flexibility is essential when advancing scientific boundaries. Perhaps a discussion for when you're a bit older, McGonagall suggested diplomatically. As the evening progressed, Harry found himself moving between worlds, helping his Hogwarts friends navigate Addams' family conversation topics while explaining school traditions to his family. It was a curious experience, this intersection of his two lives, but one that felt surprisingly natural. Toward the end of the feast, Dumbledore stood to offer a toast. The room quieted as he raised his goblet. To the Addams family, he began, eyes twinkling, whose unconventional wisdom and unique perspective have given our wizarding world one of its most interesting young students. And to Harry Potter Addams, who demonstrates daily that the boundaries between different magical traditions are more permeable, and perhaps more arbitrary, than we often acknowledge. Here, here. Gomez proclaimed, raising his own glass. To boundaries crossed, barriers broken, and the glorious unpredictability of existence. As glasses clinked, Harry felt a profound sense of connection between his two worlds, not perfectly aligned, certainly, but coexisting in a way that honored both. The Addams' appreciation for the unusual and macabre complemented rather than conflicted with Hogwarts' more structured approach to magical education. Later, as the gathering began to disperse, Harry found a moment alone with his parents near the enchanted window overlooking the grounds. "You found your place here," Morticia observed, her dark eyes studying him with maternal insight. "Not by conforming, but by bringing your Addams perspective to this new world." Harry nodded. "It's different from the mansion, but there's darkness here too, just beneath the surface. Secrets in the corridors, mysteries waiting to be uncovered. The best kind of educational environment," Gomez declared, clapping him on the shoulder. "A proper Addams thrives where others only see shadows and fear to tread." "I've been investigating some of those shadows," Harry admitted. "There's something hidden on the third floor, guarded by a three-headed dog. Something valuable enough that someone tried to steal it from Gringotts first." Instead of concern, his parents exchanged looks of delighted approval. "A proper mystery," Gomez exclaimed. "Danger, intrigue, mythological guard beasts. Reminds me of our honeymoon in the Carpathian catacombs, Equirida." "The most romantic near-death experience of my life," Morticia agreed, her eyes softening at the memory. "I'm still gathering information," Harry continued. "But I believe it involves Professor Quirrell, though Snape appears implicated as well. My scar reacts painfully in Quirrell's presence, especially when his back is turned toward me." This revelation did produce a more serious response. Morticia's elegant brow furrowed slightly. "A cursed scar reacting to specific stimuli suggests a magical connection, darling. Does this professor have any known link to Voldemort?" Harry shook his head. "Not that I've discovered. He claims to have encountered vampires and zombies during travels in Eastern Europe, but his reactions to my questions about dark creatures suggest limited actual experience. A pretender hiding something significant," Gomez mused, stroking his mustache. "Classic villain architecture. Though sometimes the most sinister plots hide behind the most unassuming facades. Remember Cousin Corvus? Everyone thought he was merely an eccentric butterfly collector until they discovered the human-sized chrysalis in his attic." "Trust your instincts, darling," Morticia advised, placing a cool hand on Harry's cheek. "An Addams senses darkness in its various forms, both the nurturing shadows we embrace and the destructive void that consumes without purpose." Harry nodded, appreciating their confidence in his judgment. "I will, Mother. And write to us with developments," Gomez added enthusiastically. "Nothing invigorates family correspondence like tales of mortal peril and magical intrigue." As the evening drew to a close, Harry walked with his family to the castle's entrance hall, where they would depart via a special portkey Dumbledore had arranged. The rest of the student body was returning from dinner in the Great Hall, creating an impromptu audience for the Addams family's farewell. Whispers followed them as they crossed the entrance hall, but Harry noticed something interesting. While many students still regarded his family with alarm, others seemed to have developed a cautious fascination. Several Ravenclaws were observing Wednesday's methodical movement with scholarly interest, while a group of Slytherins appeared to be studying Morticia's elegant bearing with something approaching admiration. Perhaps the boundaries between his worlds were more permeable than he'd realized. "Do continue your architectural documentation," Morticia encouraged as they prepared to leave. "The castle's secrets are like family heirlooms, valuable beyond measure and often lethal if mishandled. And keep practicing those aerial maneuvers," Gomez added. That standing catch was worthy of the Addams sporting legacy. Wednesday approached last, handing Harry a small black journal. My observations on magical theory based on your letters, she explained. I've included several experimental protocols that may prove useful if you encounter additional three-headed creatures or possessed faculty members. Thank you, Harry smiled, genuinely touched by his sister's practical contribution to his investigations. Also, if you obtain tissue samples from the Cerberus, I would appreciate detailed preservation for future study, she added matter-of-factly. With final embraces and Gomez's characteristic exuberant farewell, until we meet again, in this world or possibly between dimensions. The Addams family gathered around their portkey, a particularly ugly gargoyle statuette. With a flash of blue light, they vanished, leaving behind only the lingering scent of Morticia's distinctive belladonna perfume. As Harry turned back toward Gryffindor Tower, he found Ron, Hermione, and several other Gryffindors waiting for him, their expressions a mixture of awe and bewilderment. So that's your family, Ron said weakly. They're unique, Hermione offered diplomatically. They're magnificent, Harry corrected with a smile. Exactly as family should be, supportive, loving, and unafraid of life's darker mysteries. Your sister asked me extremely specific questions about how long various poisons take to affect the human nervous system, Neville said, looking pale. Wednesday has very focused academic interests, Harry explained. She's been experimenting with toxicology since she was 4. Mother says her methodical approach to chemical compounds is very advanced for her age. And your Uncle Fester gave us these, Fred announced, holding up what appeared to be small metallic spheres. Said they produce educational explosions when triggered by specific phrases. Ah, his linguistic detonators, Harry nodded. A family favorite for livening up dull dinner conversations. The activation phrases are usually compliments to authority figures, so be careful when addressing professors. Brilliant, George breathed with reverent appreciation. As they climbed the stairs toward Gryffindor Tower, Harry felt a renewed sense of purpose. The visit had reinforced his connection to his Addams roots while validating his place at Hogwarts. The two worlds weren't meant to be kept separate, but rather to inform and enhance each other. He would continue investigating the mystery of the third-floor corridor, the three-headed dog, and whatever valuable item it guarded. He would monitor Professor Quirrell and the strange connection to his scar. He would excel in his classes while maintaining his unique Addams perspective on magical education. And he would do it all with the confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was, Harry Potter Addams, child of two worlds, at home in the shadows that others feared to explore. The weeks following the Quidditch match and Addams' family visit brought new developments in Harry's investigation of the third-floor mystery. With Christmas approaching, he, Ron, and Hermione spent increasing time in the library, searching for information about valuable magical objects that might warrant such elaborate protection. Nicholas Flamel, Hermione muttered as they pored over yet another tome on famous wizards of the modern era. I know I've read that name somewhere. Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly, Harry suggested, closing Great Wizards of the 20th Century with a thoughtful expression. In the Addams family archives, the most dangerous items are often catalogued not by creator but by effect. Grandmother Frump organizes the poison collection by symptoms rather than botanical origins. So instead of looking for Flamel, we should be researching what the object does? Ron asked, rubbing tired eyes. Precisely, Harry nodded. What item would be valuable enough to store at Gringotts, then relocate to Hogwarts under Dumbledore's protection, guarded by multiple enchantments and a Cerberus? Something powerful, Hermione reasoned. And probably dangerous in the wrong hands. Which narrows it down to about half the wizarding artifacts ever created, Ron groaned. Not necessarily, Harry countered, retrieving his grimoire from his book bag. I've been documenting patterns in our discoveries. Consider, Vault 713 was emptied the same day as the break-in attempt. Hagrid mentioned Hogwarts being the safest place for something, except perhaps Gringotts. The three-headed dog guards a trapdoor, suggesting additional protections below. He flipped through his meticulous notes until finding the page he sought. And most significantly, Professor Quirrell's behavior changed after the troll incident. His stutter becomes less pronounced when he thinks no one is paying attention, and my scar reacts most strongly when his turban faces me. You think Quirrell's trying to steal whatever it is? Hermione asked skeptically. But he seems so timid. Great Uncle Mortimer seemed timid too, Harry replied. Wouldn't hurt a fly, everyone said, until they discovered his collection of perfectly preserved postal workers in the wine cellar. Ron and Hermione exchanged the now familiar glance they shared whenever Harry referenced his family's more disturbing exploits. The point, Harry continued, is that appearances can be cultivated specifically to deflect suspicion. The most effective disguise is one that encourages others to underestimate you. Before they could discuss further, Madame Pants descended upon them, shooing them from the library as closing time approached. As they made their way back to Gryffindor Tower, Harry noticed Professor Quirrell hurrying down a side corridor, moving with none of his usual nervous hesitation. There, Harry whispered, pulling his friends behind a suit of armor. Watch his gait, confident, purposeful. Nothing like his classroom demeanor. They observed as Quirrell disappeared around a corner, headed in the direction of the forbidden third-floor corridor. We should follow him, Harry suggested. The Addams approach to investigation prioritizes direct observation over theoretical research. The Addams approach to investigation probably gets a lot of people killed, Hermione pointed out dryly. Only the careless ones, Harry assured her. And we'll be exceptionally careful. Despite Hermione's protests, they trailed Quirrell at a safe distance, employing the shadow-walking technique Harry had perfected during years of midnight exploration in the mansion. They followed until the professor stopped before the door leading to the three-headed dog's chamber. Quirrell drew his wand, muttering an unlocking spell, but before he could enter, another figure emerged from the shadows, Professor Snape. Good evening, Quirrell, Snape's cold voice carried clearly to where they hid. Fancy finding you here. SS Severus, Quirrell stammered, his nervous persona instantly restored. I was just checking the P protections. Indeed. Snape's voice dripped with suspicion. How conscientious of you. And why, pray tell, would the defense against the dark arts professor concern himself with protections that are already quite adequate? One can never be too careful, Quirrell replied, his hand trembling visibly. Perhaps, Snape stepped closer, looming over the shorter man, you should direct your careful attention elsewhere. Your continued interest in this corridor has not gone unnoticed. As the professor's confrontation continued, Harry observed with growing interest. The dynamic between them suggested that Snape wasn't trying to steal the hidden object, he was protecting it from Quirrell. We've seen enough, Hermione whispered urgently. We need to go before they catch us. Reluctantly, Harry agreed, and they retreated silently to Gryffindor Tower. Once safely in the common room, they huddled in a quiet corner to discuss their observations. Snape's not the villain, Ron realized. He's suspicious of Quirrell too. It appears so, Harry agreed. Though his methods lack a certain diplomatic finesse. But what does Quirrell want? Hermione wondered. And why does your scar hurt around him? Harry touched his forehead thoughtfully. There's a connection we're missing. Something linking Quirrell, this mysterious object, and Voldemort. Ron flinched at the name. You think you know who is involved somehow? The scar was created by his curse, Harry reasoned. Its reaction to specific stimuli suggests a magical resonance. Mother says cursed wounds often retain sympathetic connections to their creators. But you know who is gone, Ron protested. Destroyed when he tried to kill you. Perhaps not entirely, Harry mused. The Addams family grimoires describe numerous methods for preserving essence beyond bodily destruction. Great-great-grandfather Balthazar maintained cognitive function for 3 years after decapitation through a rather complex enchantment involving his favorite smoking jacket and 7 black candles. That's different, Hermione insisted. No documented magic can prevent death completely. Harry's eyes lit up. Prevention of death, immortality. He flipped rapidly through his grimoire until finding the page he sought. Here, Notes from Professor Bin's lecture on medieval alchemy. Nicholas Flamel is mentioned as the only known creator of the Philosopher's Stone. The what? Ron asked. The Philosopher's Stone, Hermione gasped, recognition dawning. Of course. It transforms any metal into pure gold and produces the elixir of life, which makes the drinker immortal. That's what's being guarded, Flamel's Philosopher's Stone. A stone that grants immortality would certainly qualify as valuable enough to warrant extraordinary protection, Harry agreed. And if Voldemort's essence persists in some diminished form, he could use the stone to return, Hermione finished, her face pale. And Quirrell might be helping him, Ron added grimly. Which explains my scar's reaction, Harry concluded. If Voldemort's presence is somehow connected to Quirrell, perhaps magically attached or possessing him in some manner, it would create precisely the pattern of pain I've experienced. They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the implications of their discovery. We need to tell someone, Hermione insisted. Dumbledore should know. I suspect he already does, Harry replied thoughtfully. His toast at the family gathering mentioned boundaries between magical traditions being permeable. He was telling me to trust my Addams instincts about sensing darkness. So what do we do? Ron asked. Harry closed his grimoire decisively. We prepare. If Quirrell attempts to steal the stone, we need to be ready to intervene. The Addams family has a saying, never confront the supernatural without at least 3 backup plans and appropriate ceremonial attire. I'm not sure about the ceremonial attire, Hermione said weakly, but I agree we should prepare. We should learn more about the other protections besides the dog. Hagrid let slip that different professors contributed protective enchantments, Harry recalled. Based on our classes, we can make educated guesses about their nature and prepare accordingly. And so, as Christmas approached, they divided their preparation efforts, Hermione researching magical protections, Ron strategizing potential interventions, and Harry documenting everything in his grimoire while maintaining discreet surveillance of Quirrell's activities. The castle emptied as most students returned home for the holidays, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione chose to remain at Hogwarts, officially to use the library resources, unofficially to continue their investigation. Christmas morning arrived with a light snowfall that transformed the grounds into a pristine white landscape. Harry woke early, as was his habit, to find a small pile of presents at the foot of his bed. The Addams family gift was unmistakable, wrapped in black paper with silver ribbon and emitting a faint, melodious humming sound. Inside was an exquisite miniature reproduction of the Addams mansion, perfect in every architectural detail. It's a sentinel simulacrum, Harry explained to Ron, who was watching with fascination as tiny lights flickered in the model's windows. A magical connection to the actual mansion. If I need emergency assistance, breaking the central turret will alert the family instantly. Your family thinks of everything, Ron said, impressed despite himself. Preparedness is an Addams tradition, Harry agreed, carefully placing the model on his bedside table. His other gifts included a hand-carved wooden flute from Hagrid, a box of chocolate frogs from Hermione, and a hand-knitted sweater in scarlet with a gold Gryffindor lion from Mrs. Weasley, which Harry found touchingly thoughtful. The most mysterious gift, however, was a package containing a fluid, silvery gray cloth that seemed to flow like water through his fingers. When he tried it on, Ron gasped. That's an invisibility cloak. They're really rare and valuable. A note had fallen from the wrapping, your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you. There was no signature. Harry examined the cloak with reverence. A family heirloom from my birth father, he murmured. What extraordinary timing, just when we might need to move through the castle undetected. You think someone knows what we're investigating? Ron asked nervously. Perhaps, Harry mused. Or perhaps the castle itself is providing what we need. Magical buildings develop their own form of sentience over time. The mansion often reveals hidden passages precisely when family members require escape routes. Whatever the explanation, the cloak proved immediately useful in their continued surveillance of Quirrell. That very night, Harry used it to follow the professor to the restricted section of the library, where he observed him researching ancient texts on soul magic and parasitic possession, further confirming their suspicions about Voldemort's potential involvement. As winter melted into spring, their preparation intensified. Hermione created detailed study schedules that incorporated both exam revision and research into magical protections. Ron, whose strategic thinking had been honed by years of wizard chess, developed contingency plans for various scenarios. Harry continued his methodical documentation, adding to his grimoire nightly with observations, theories, and tactical assessments. The Addams family, kept informed through Harry's regular correspondence, provided helpful if unconventional advice. Uncle Fester sent detailed instructions for creating emergency explosive diversions, while Wednesday contributed a scholarly analysis of Cerberus behavioral patterns based on historical accounts. Morticia supplied a small vial of what she described as essence of darkness, a potion that could temporarily extinguish all light sources in a large area if necessary. "Your family is terrifying," Ron observed as Harry carefully stored these contributions in his trunk. "Brilliant, but terrifying." "Thank you," Harry smiled. They'd consider that high praise. As exams approached, the stress levels in Gryffindor Tower rose dramatically. Most students were focused solely on their academic performance, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione balanced their studies with continued vigilance regarding the stone. Their breakthrough came during a visit to Hagrid's hut, where they discovered not only confirmation about the various professors' protective enchantments but also that Hagrid had inadvertently told a stranger how to get past Fluffy, the three-headed dog, by playing music to lull it to sleep. "The timing is suspicious," Harry noted as they hurried back to the castle. "A mysterious stranger happens to have a dragon egg, Hagrid's greatest wish, and just happens to ask how to get past a Cerberus. It must have been Quirrell," Hermione concluded. "Or you know who working through him. And now he has everything he needs to get to the stone," Ron added grimly. They rushed to find Professor McGonagall, hoping to alert Dumbledore, only to learn that the headmaster had been called away to the Ministry of Magic on urgent business. "Too convenient," Harry murmured as they left McGonagall's office. "An emergency requiring Dumbledore's absence just when the final piece of information has been obtained." "He's going after the stone tonight," Hermione whispered. "With Dumbledore gone, there's nothing to stop him." Harry nodded decisively. "Then we'll have to stop him ourselves." That night, they prepared carefully. Harry collected the tools the Addams family had provided, Morticia's essence of darkness, Uncle Fester's emergency detonators, and the small silver flute Gomez had sent for soothing savage beasts or summoning ancestral spirits, whichever proves necessary. Hermione reviewed her notes on potential magical protections, while Ron packed a wizard's chess set, reasoning that strategy might be required at some point in their mission. Under the cover of the invisibility cloak, they made their way to the third-floor corridor. Harry held his wand ready as he unlocked the door, revealing Fluffy in all his three-headed glory, already asleep to the sound of an enchanted harp playing in the corner. "Quirrell's already been here," Ron whispered. "Then we must hurry," Harry replied calmly, approaching the trap door the beast had been guarding. What followed was a series of challenges that tested not only their magical abilities but their unique individual strengths. They navigated Devil's Snare with Hermione's knowledge of herbology and Harry's calm suggestion of using bluebell flames. They captured a flying key using Harry's seeker skills. They conquered a giant wizard's chess set through Ron's strategic brilliance, though not without cost. Ron was knocked unconscious during the final move. "You go ahead," Hermione told Harry after they'd ensured Ron was merely stunned rather than seriously injured. "I'll get him to the hospital wing and alert the professors." Harry nodded, continuing alone through the black flames guarded by Snape's logic puzzle, solved easily with Hermione's help before she departed. As he swallowed the potion that would allow him to proceed, he felt a curious sense of calm. Every step of this journey had confirmed what he'd suspected since Halloween: nothing at Hogwarts happened by coincidence, and he was meant to face whatever waited beyond the flames. The final chamber contained only the mirror of Ariste, which Harry had discovered during his nocturnal explorations months earlier, and Professor Quirrell, standing before it with an expression of frustrated rage. "I should have known it would be you, Potter," Quirrell said without turning, his voice notably lacking its usual stutter. "Potter Addams," Harry corrected automatically, stepping into the chamber. "And yes, your performance was convincing but ultimately flawed. The stutter was inconsistent under stress, and your body language changed dramatically when you thought yourself unobserved." Quirrell turned, a cruel smile replacing his usual nervous expression. "Clever boy. Too clever for your own good, perhaps. Did you really think you, a mere first year, could stop me?" "Not alone," Harry replied honestly. "But I'm never truly alone. The Addams family has ways of providing assistance even at a distance." He patted his pocket, where the miniature mansion sat alongside Morticia's potion and Fester's devices, physical connections to his adoptive family's power and knowledge. "Your freakish adopted family can't help you now," Quirrell sneered. "No one can. Not even Dumbledore suspected me, he was too busy watching Severus. While I bided my time, learning the protections, discovering the final obstacle." He gestured angrily at the mirror. "I see myself presenting the stone to my master, but I cannot determine how to retrieve it." "The mirror shows our deepest desires," Harry observed calmly. "But doesn't provide the means to achieve them. That would be far too straightforward for Dumbledore's style." "Use the boy," came a high, cold voice that seemed to emanate from Quirrell himself. "Let him look." Harry felt a chill of recognition. That voice, it resonated with something in his scar, which began to throb painfully. "Potter. Come here." Quirrell commanded, gesturing impatiently. "Potter Addams," Harry corrected again, his mind racing as he approached cautiously. "The Addams family has a tradition of treating mirrors with proper respect, they often serve as gateways between worlds." "Look in the mirror and tell me what you see," Quirrell demanded, positioning Harry in front of the glass. Harry gazed into the mirror of Ariste, expecting to see what he'd viewed during his previous encounter, himself surrounded by both his birth parents and the Addams family, two lineages united. Instead, he saw only his reflection, which smiled at him before reaching into its pocket to withdraw a blood-red stone. The reflection winked and returned the stone to its pocket, and as it did so, Harry felt something heavy drop into his real pocket. Somehow, impossibly, he had obtained the Philosopher's Stone. "Well?" Quirrell demanded impatiently. "What do you see?" Harry called upon every lesson in composure Morticia had ever taught him. "I see myself surrounded by family," he replied truthfully if incompletely. "Both the Potters and the Addamses, together." "He lies," came that high, cold voice again. "Let me speak to him, face to face." "Master, you are not strong enough." Quirrell protested. "I have strength enough, for this." Harry watched with clinical fascination as Quirrell unwrapped his turban, revealing what should have been the back of his head. Instead, there was a face, chalk white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils, like a snake. "Harry Potter," the face whispered. "Voldemort, I presume," Harry replied with the formal politeness Gomez had insisted was appropriate when addressing even the most malevolent supernatural entities. "Or what remains of you?" The face hissed in anger. "You see what I have become? Mere shadow and vapor, forced to share another's body. Unicorn blood has sustained me, but it cannot give me a body of my own. However, there is something that can, something that conveniently lies in your pocket." Harry nodded thoughtfully. "The Philosopher's Stone. A rather elegant solution to your predicament, I must admit. The elixir of life would certainly restore physical form." Voldemort's red eyes narrowed at Harry's analytical tone. "You are not afraid." "Fear is a reaction to the unknown or unpredictable," Harry explained. "The Addams family approaches the supernatural with curiosity rather than terror. Great-Uncle Abhorrence maintained a fascinating correspondence with several malevolent entities from the Netherworld for decades. This was clearly not the response Voldemort had expected. The face contorted with rage. "Give me the stone, boy, or witness your Muggle family's destruction. I have powers beyond your comprehension." Harry smiled slightly. "You might find the Addams family surprisingly difficult to destroy. They've survived witch hunts, inquisitions, angry mobs, and several attempted exorcisms. Cousin Drusilla actually married the last exorcist who tried, said his Latin pronunciation was exquisitely precise." "Enough." Voldemort snarled. "Quirrell, seize him." As Quirrell lunged forward, Harry recalled Wednesday's parting advice before the Addams family left Hogwarts: if you encounter possession, remember that parasitic entities create magical vulnerabilities at the intersection points between host and invader. Acting on instinct, Harry reached out and grasped Quirrell's face with his bare hands. Immediately, the professor screamed in agony, his skin blistering and burning wherever Harry touched. "Master, I cannot hold him, my hands, my hands." Quirrell shrieked as he tried to throw Harry off. "Then kill him, fool!" Voldemort screeched. But Harry pressed his advantage, maintaining contact despite the searing pain in his scar. He recognized the magical principle at work: his mother's protection, the love-based magic that had saved him as a baby, was anathema to Voldemort's parasitic existence. Fascinating, he managed through gritted teeth as Quirrell's body began to crumble beneath his touch. A protection based on sacrificial love magic, one of the oldest and most powerful forms of sympathetic enchantment. As Quirrell collapsed and Voldemort's wraith tore itself from the disintegrating body with a terrible scream, Harry's vision began to darken. His last conscious thought was that Uncle Fester would be tremendously disappointed he hadn't needed to use any of the emergency explosives. Harry awoke in the hospital wing to find Headmaster Dumbledore sitting beside his bed, blue eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. "Good afternoon, Harry," he greeted warmly. "Headmaster," Harry replied, sitting up carefully. His body ached, but his mind was clear. "How long have I been unconscious?" 3 days. "Your friends Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger will be most relieved you've awakened, they've been quite concerned." Harry nodded, cataloguing the various gifts piled on his bedside table, sweets from his classmates, flowers, and what appeared to be a small skull carved from obsidian, which could only have come from Wednesday. "The stone?" he inquired. "Destroyed, with Nicholas Flamel's full agreement," Dumbledore replied. "He and his wife have enough elixir stored to set their affairs in order, then they will die." Harry considered this a fascinating choice, to relinquish immortality voluntarily. The Addams family has several members who've achieved technical immortality through various supernatural means, though Great Aunt Despondent says after the first 2 centuries, dinner party conversation becomes dreadfully repetitive. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Indeed, many find that a well-lived finite existence holds more meaning than endless continuation. Your aunt sounds like a wise woman. She's been clinically dead since 1853, but continues to offer advice during particularly strong seances," Harry explained matter-of-factly. "The family finds her perspective on historical events invaluable." "Your family continues to fascinate me, Harry," Dumbledore smiled. "Their approach to what others consider impossible is refreshingly unencumbered by conventional limitations." They discussed the events in the chamber, Quirrell's possession, Voldemort's wraith, and the protection Harry's mother had provided through her sacrifice. "Love," Dumbledore explained, "is perhaps the most powerful and least understood form of magic. Your mother's love created a protection that lives in your very skin, something Voldemort, who has never understood love, could not touch without suffering." Harry nodded thoughtfully. "Mother, Morticia, says something similar about ancient magic. The most potent enchantments require sacrifice freely given, with full understanding of the cost. She believes it's why certain family rituals must be performed with one's own blood rather than a convenient substitute's." "Mrs. Addams sounds remarkably well-versed in magical theory for someone without formal wizarding education," Dumbledore observed. "The Addams family traditions predate many modern magical classifications," Harry explained. Great-grandmother Desdemona corresponded extensively with medieval alchemists, and several ancestors were practicing necromancers before the ministry began regulating such arts. Dumbledore studied him for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Harry, when I arranged for you to be placed with the Addams family, there were those who expressed concerns." This was news to Harry. "You arranged my placement?" "Indirectly," Dumbledore acknowledged. "After your parents' deaths, there were limited options for your guardianship. Your mother's sister was the obvious choice for blood protection reasons, but when certain indicators suggested an alternative family with the necessary protective capabilities had presented themselves, I ensured the proper authorities looked the other way." The note with me on the doorstep, Harry realized. It wasn't signed, but it guided them to take me in. Sometimes, Dumbledore said with a small smile, the right family finds a child through seemingly mysterious circumstances. The Addams family has ancient protective magic woven into its very foundations, different from what your mother provided, but complementary. You grew up surrounded by people who not only accepted the unusual but celebrated it. They gave me a home, Harry said simply. And taught me never to fear the shadows, but to understand them. Precisely, Dumbledore nodded. And that, I believe, will prove invaluable in the challenges that lie ahead. Voldemort is not gone, merely diminished once more. He will find other ways to return, other servants who share his desires. And when he does, I'll be ready, Harry promised. With both my mother's protection and the Addams family knowledge to draw upon. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. I have no doubt you will face whatever comes with remarkable composure, Harry. Now, I suggest you begin enjoying some of these sweets. Ah, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. I was unfortunate enough to come across a vomit-flavored one in my youth, and I'm afraid I've lost my liking for them. But I think I'll be safe with a nice toffee. He popped a golden brown bean into his mouth, then choked slightly. Alas! Earwax. Grandmama says unexpected flavors build character, Harry offered consolingly. After Dumbledore departed, Ron and Hermione burst in, relieved to find Harry awake and recovering. They shared their experiences following their separation, how Dumbledore had met Hermione in the entrance hall, seemingly already aware that Harry had gone after Quirrell, how Ron had recovered quickly from his chest injuries, and how the entire school was buzzing with increasingly outlandish rumors about what had occurred beneath the trapdoor. Some are saying you transformed into a wraith yourself and frightened you-know-who away, Ron reported with a grin. Others think you summoned dark creatures from your family's mansion to battle him. Much simpler than that, Harry smiled. Though I'm sure Uncle Fester would have been delighted to assist if dimensional summoning were permitted on school grounds. The end-of-year feast brought final surprises, last-minute house points awarded for their adventure that secured Gryffindor the House Cup, defeating Slytherin for the first time in 7 years. As red and gold decorations replaced the Slytherin green and silver, Harry felt a surge of belonging. Different as his perspective might be, he had found his place at Hogwarts. As the Hogwarts Express carried them back toward London the following day, Harry reflected on his first year in the wizarding world. He discovered new aspects of his identity, formed friendships based on acceptance rather than fear of his differences, and confirmed that the Addams family approach to the macabre and mysterious had practical applications even at a conventional magical institution. You must come and stay this summer, Ron insisted as they neared King's Cross. Both of you. I'll send an owl. Thank you, Harry smiled. I'd like that, though I should warn you that Addams family visits often involve unexpected supernatural occurrences. Cousin Itt once spent a weekend with the Romanian branch, and they're still trying to exorcise the peculiar dimensional rift in their pantry. Maybe just a short visit then, Ron amended weakly. As the train pulled into the station, Harry spotted them immediately, the Addams family standing amid the crowd of ordinary parents like exotic predators among herbivores. Morticia in flowing black, Gomez in his pinstriped suit, Wednesday and Pugsley looking like miniature undertakers, and Lurch looming behind them all like a particularly somber mountain. Nearby parents were giving them a wide berth, some hurrying their children past with nervous glances, others staring in undisguised fascination. "There's my family," Harry said with pride, gathering his trunk and Edgar's cage. "They're distinctive," Hermione observed diplomatically. "Scary as hell," Ron contributed, though with a hint of admiration. "But brilliant." As Harry stepped onto the platform, Morticia glided forward to embrace him, her pale skin cool against his cheek. "Welcome home, darling. We've missed you terribly." "The mansion hasn't been the same," Gomez declared, clapping him on the shoulder. "Thing has been moping about, the plants have been drooping, and even the quicksand pit seems to have lost its enthusiastic pull." "Hi, Harry," Wednesday greeted in her flat voice. "I preserved the mandrake you sent for my specimen collection. Its screams make an interesting counterpoint to the sound of struggling mice." "I blew up your old treehouse," Pugsley announced proudly. "Uncle Fester helped. Improvement opportunity." Gomez beamed. "We'll build you a new one, bigger and more precarious than ever." Harry introduced his friends, who managed polite greetings despite their obvious intimidation. Mrs. Weasley, who had arrived to collect her children, approached cautiously but with genuine warmth. "You must be Harry's family," she said, extending a hand to Morticia. "I'm Molly Weasley, Ron's mother." Charmed, Morticia replied with elegant grace, accepting the handshake. "Your son has been an excellent companion for Harry. Such a healthy appreciation for the more adventurous aspects of education." "That's one way to put it," Mrs. Weasley said weakly, having clearly heard something about their third-floor corridor expedition. As goodbyes were exchanged and plans made for summer visits, Harry felt the comfortable transition between his worlds. He belonged in both, the conventional wizarding community with its own peculiarities and traditions, and the loving darkness of the Addams family with their celebration of the macabre. They made a striking procession as they left the station, Lurch carrying Harry's trunk with one hand, Gomez entertaining passers-by with impromptu sword flourishes, Morticia gliding with elegant grace that turned heads, Wednesday and Pugsley engaging in what appeared to be a whispered debate about optimal methods for extracting nightshade essence. And at the center walked Harry Potter Addams, his lightning scar a pale mark against his skin, his green eyes bright behind his glasses, a small smile playing about his lips as he returned to the family who had taught him the most important lesson of all: true strength comes not from denying darkness, but from understanding it, from walking confidently into shadows where others fear to tread, and finding they're not monsters to defeat, but mysteries to embrace. As Gomez always said, an Addams is never afraid of the dark, because the dark is afraid of an Addams. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.